So, good morning to everyone. Welcome, dear guests from the Coimbra Group, and a welcome to the public conference during this year's Coimbra Group annual conference here at the University of Cologne. Africa meets Europe, academic cooperation for a sustainable global future. Many of you already have met yesterday night our rector, Professor Freimuth, at the town hall reception. And of course, he will be joining us in the course of the day as well in several meetings. But this morning, I have the honor to introduce now to you our welcome speech from the university leadership. This will be given by our Vice Rector for Teaching and Studies, as well as a Coimbra Group Executive Board Member, Professor Beatrix Busse. Welcome.
Geht das so? Darf ich das? Ah, okay. No, ist gut. Tu das. Geht das? Distinguished leaders from the Coimbra member universities, much esteemed members of the executive board, and of course, dear Ludovic, dear speakers and panelists, dear friends and colleagues, and Coimbra enthusiasts, ladies and gentlemen. Last year, at the closing of our wonderful Coimbra conference in Padua, I had the honor to invite you to Cologne for this year's conference. I invited you to undertake a pilgrimage from one European university city to another, as Albertus Magnus had done, the medieval scholar spending a large part of his life doing interdisciplinary research here in Cologne and also in Padua. And I'm sure that meanwhile, you have discovered his statue standing in front of this building. On behalf of the Rectorate of the University of Cologne, and especially on behalf of the Rector, and as the member of the Coimbra Executive Board, I'm very glad to see so many of you followed our invitation. It is great to have you here in Cologne today. A very warm welcome to all of you. A warm welcome to this part of the Coimbra annual gathering, the public conference, which is titled, as we've already heard, Africa Meets Europe, Academic Cooperation for a Sustainable Global Future. In cooperation with the Coimbra office, the board, our team here at Cologne, we decidedly went for this theme, for a focus on science policy aspects, for the different voices from and for Africa, who we will hear in a minute, and also the description of hands-on projects. And there are many reasons for that. Although we have traveled from one European city to the next, from Pavia to Cologne, our Coimbra and also the University of Cologne mindset is and are luckily global. At this very moment also, more than 1,000 participants from Europe and Africa are also participating, as you've already heard, in a European Conference on African Studies at the University of Cologne, and you've seen it here. This conference is being held parallel to this annual conference with the theme African Futures. And how fitting really to thematically align them, to foster exchange, and really excel in what I think we are best at unis, to be curious and bring diverse people together to create research and new findings. Thirdly, academic cooperation between Africa and Europe is imperative if we are to take up global responsibility for global problems. Global responsibility is definitely linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. And Coimbra has done lots of policy work, not just that, but lots of policy work in those fields. At the University of Cologne, we also mark this in our internationalization and sustainability strategy, in various SDG projects from, for example, the International Division, one of which you will hear about in a minute in the second panel, in the European University for Wellbeing, which the University of Cologne leads, we have and will have a global focus with Africa and also a global health focus there as well. We have also started the Global South Studies Center here at Cologne, established in 2014, which brings together research expertise from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and promotes interdisciplinary cooperation among leading researchers in Germany and internationally. A few affiliated projects relate to that. For example, a collaborative research center on future rural Africa, future making and social ecological transformation, or the project on rewilding the Anthropocene, a project funded by the European Research Council, or the African Climate and Environment Center, which is one of our 4 global climate and environment centers as such. A competence center for fair trade, aiming to promote research on fair trade in German-speaking countries. And in July, the University of Cologne will open a regional office in Accra, Ghana. And like the existing offices in New York, New Delhi, Beijing, and Cairo, this 5th office will serve as a central point of contact for researchers and students. So we work on all these projects in all our missions, and in what I think characterizes or should characterize the spirit of the University of the Future, and what I believe is also the Coimbra spirit. With all our values, peace, democracy, and especially academic freedom, excellence, and academic rigor. We also do this with what further marks also our values and Coimbra values, the cooperative, co-creative spirit, with humility and humanity, with our characteristic critical self-reflection, with a transdisciplinary approach, with the focus on equity, inclusion and diversity and openness that is not westernized, not Eurocentric, and not colonial. We learn from each other, we are bridge builders, and we also question norms. And we do this for all and with all who are united in the endeavor to create new findings and, to use the German word Bildung, for a sustainable, peaceful, and democratic future. Crises such as Brexit, or most recently the war on Ukraine, make us painfully aware that we need to make further efforts to achieve this goal of unity. Cooperation unites us, supports us, gives us security. And another future skill which we have marked and should mark in our missions. Thus, we cannot just focus on dismantling borders within Europe. That could mean erecting new borders on the edges of it. Our title is not Europe meets Africa, but purposefully the other way around, Africa meets Europe. In these trying times, the emphasis is on Africa, and we have to learn a lot, and can learn a lot from Africa. For, as we must realize, Africa is also our joint future, our tomorrow mind. Also, because we have begun, many of us, to clear up our dark colonial past and also cultural heritage. Furthermore, Africa's growing population determines the future of our planet. The way we build, the way we'll have to speak and listen to several languages, and significantly, who and how data is, who owns data, how it is used and interpreted. As Leslie Loco, famous Ghanaian Scottish architect, academic and novelist, and this year's first female lead of the Architecture Biennale, and is quoted in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung in May this year, in Africa, things become visible which are invisible in the global north. Conflicts in and solutions for topics such as climate change, ecology, use of data, new models of possession and telecommunication. And one focus of the Biennale titled is The Lab of the Future and Adaptive Reuse. Or as Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie movingly shows us in her book On Grief, which is about the death of her father, how much grief is about language, the failure of language and the grasping for language. Or, as Ghanaian-British Michaela Coel describes empathy using the noun misfit. A misfit is one who looks at life differently. Many, however, are made into misfits because life looks at them differently. The term misfit can be cross-generational, and crosses concepts of gender and culture simply by a desire for transparency, a desire to see another's point of view. So, in Coimbra and here as well at the University of Cologne, we have working groups, we have the focus on Africa as such that contribute to these huge geopolitical and other challenges and opportunities. And it is also with great humility and, as I've said, self-reflectiveness that we embark here on building those futures and bridges together. I would like to thank the team of the International Division for all their work in organizing this conference. This is amazing what you have achieved and how everything is running smoothly. Thank you very much for that. Yes. Thank you also to the speakers, panelists, and moderators who will be coming up here very soon. I wish everyone here an interesting conference with fruitful discussions and attentive listening as well. For as we all know, lasting and meaningful cooperation can only be built through connection and perhaps always also by attempting to be curious misfits. Thank you very much. Enjoy this morning. Our Lady of Ceremonies will now continue to tell us how we proceed.
Thank you very much for your introductory speech. Yes, good morning again. Thank you very much for these welcome words on behalf of our university. And until the coffee break, we will have 2 individual speeches and then followed by a panel discussion. And the idea is that we have the speeches and now in a row, but the speakers who are speaking right now next will be answering questions once we are finished with the panelist discussion. Then we will open up a Q&A session for the whole morning session before the coffee break. So we would now like to welcome our guest speaker from the European Commission, Mr. Domenico Rosa, and he's currently the head of unit on strategic partnerships with Africa and the organization African, Caribbean and Pacific States at the Directorate General for International Partnerships of the European Union. This union is particularly in charge of the institutional relations with African Union and of the monitoring of the implementation of the Africa strategy. Mr. Rosa is very, very experienced with external relation works, also with the African continent and institutions. And one more thing that connects him to the Coimbra group, that he earns one of his degrees at the University of Padua, which is a Coimbra University. So welcome to Cologne, welcome to the conference. We are very much looking forward to your speech.
Great. So thank you very much for this invitation, and thank you for your warm welcome. I think that the many elements were put on the table even in the opening speech, and I think that definitely they went into the exact direction where we as the European Union would like to see our relation with Africa. And I think that is important today that we could discuss the importance of the relationship between Europe and Africa, in particular when it comes to people-to-people exchange and the cooperation between the 2 continents in this. Okay, no, it's okay. Yeah. In particular when it refers to higher education. So you know that perfectly well that Africa is the Europe's closest neighbor, and in a way our sister continent, not only for historic reason but also for geographic reason. And of course, even if there was a colonial past, I think that we still have a solid relation with Africa, and this is even more important now to consolidate this historical relation if you want to achieve something that is not just for Africa or just for Europe, that is the achievement of the SDGs by 2030, and also if we want to achieve what we could consider our common objective, that are green transition. You know that European Union has a blueprint in the Green Deal, that of course the Green Deal can only succeed in Europe if the rest of the world is in a way or another following and adapting. So this is definitely important. The second one is digitalization. We consider that we made a digital revolution, and this is something that for Africa could be even easier compared to our experience, in the sense that they have not to go through the same path that we did in the past. Another element is the question of sustainable growth and jobs. You know that Africa is one of the youngest continents, where the population is supposed to grow at an exceptional rate, and of course we have to find a job for this youth that is in the continent, if we want to avoid the problems of migration, the problem of war, the problem of instability inside the continent, that of course will have spillover outside and in Europe. It's clear that when we are referring to Africa, we are now in a very competitive environment. It is much more competitive than before. We have new, say, global players that are seeing Africa as a field of opportunity. Just to mention a few, we have China, but we have India, we have Turkey, we have Russia, we have Brazil, and so on. And therefore, I think that it is important that we, as Europe, we can propose an offer to Africa that is different and that is based on value, on common values, more than on, I would say, unilateral interest, as could be the case with other partners. It's clear that the scenario is now challenging. There was the pandemics, then there was the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this, of course, has created a lot of say problems, not only in Europe but also in Africa. And I think that the lesson that we can take from the two, I would say, major events that I would say in a way changed a little bit our life, is the fact that we should try as much as possible to promote a strategic autonomy both for Europe and for Africa, in the sense that if we would like to have our strategic autonomy when it refers to possible problems that can occur, this can only be achieved only if Africa is also able to cope with the challenges through an autonomous strategic autonomy. We have seen the question of the vaccine. At some point, there was the question that vaccines were not, well, we did our job in developing at a very fast rate the vaccine in Europe, but then there was the problem of making a vaccine available in Africa, and this was definitely a major problem that we had to overcome, because it's not just a question of producing, but it's also a question of making the vaccine available and distributed. When we are speaking on the engagement of Europe with Africa, I think that there are an element that should be kept in mind, is the fact that we, as Europe, we remain for Africa the main partner. We are the main trade partner. We are the main source of foreign direct investment. And of course, we are also I would say, the major provider of official development aid to Africa. Said that, I don't think that the official development aid that is, I would say, averaging 23 billion euro per year, considering the EU and its member state, is not the game changer for Africa. I think that the game changer for Africa is the fact that Africa should move into, I would say, an autonomous development, and the fact that one of the blueprints of the continental policy is the establishment of the continental free trade areas is definitely something that could change the dynamics in Africa and the dynamics in the relation between Africa and the rest of the world, including Europe. There is this needs of creating a productive basis in Africa in order to allow Africa to exchange inside the continent. You know that the intra-trade, the African intra-trade is one of the lowest in the world when we compare to Europe, where more than 60% of our exchanges are taking place between the member states of the African Union. In order to, I would say, frame in a political way what are our relations with Africa, you know that we have, I would say, a regular meeting at ministerial and head of state level, and the latest was the summit that was held in Brussels in 2022, where finally the head of state and government of the 27 EU member states and the 55 head of state and government from Africa met in order to, I would say, together trying to develop what could be a joint vision for 2030. This joint vision for 2030 is the policy framework in which we would like to insert our activity and our relation with Africa. And of course, this highlighted, I would say, some main priority. The first one is the need of filling the gap in terms of infrastructure in Africa, and this is why we proposed to have this investment package related to the global gateway, that is, I would say, the offer that the EU can make at international level and the global level in terms of infrastructure, where more than 150 billion should be invested in Africa from now to 2027. The second one is an enhanced and renewed cooperation in terms of peace and security. You know that Europe has been investing more than 2 billion euro in funding Africa-led peacekeeping operation in Somalia, in Sahel, and other, I would say, critical areas in Africa. The fourth is the third is, an enhancement and the reciprocal partnership on migration and mobility. This is definitely a question that where our member states are particularly sensitive. And the last one, there is an attempt to promote an enhanced cooperation around multilateralism. We have seen in the recent invasion of Ukraine by Russia that African continent was a little bit scattered in term of position when we consider that, I would say, condemning the invasion of a sovereign state into another sovereign state could be something straightforward, and in fact it was not the case. I think that the ambition is also to promote as much as possible the relation among the citizens and a people-to-people approach, because I think that, and we consider that in a way we are not just providing assistance, and when we see the migratory flows coming to Europe, of course there is behind an economic motivation. But I think that Europe can also represent, in a way, a kind of aspirational society based on rules, based on principle, where we are in the respect of the diversity and where we try to overcome, I would say, the national interest that could be present in each single member state. And in a way, Europe is the only experiment since the end of the Second World War that managed to bring to the people prosperity, peace, security, and the possibility of working around common objective. So just to make things short, I will just do a focus on what we are intending to do in education. You know that EU is already supporting national initiative on education and training in more than 43 African countries. In 2023, we will start launching a regional flagship initiative that have been presented at the African Union Summit. And our initiative aims to have a transformational impact on skills by investing around 500 million in a Team Europe initiative focusing essentially on opportunity-driven skill and vocational education training in Africa, including through funding from the regional and national cooperation envelopes and Erasmus+. The second point is the Youth Mobility for Africa, a flagship that is ongoing since a while. Well, we'll further promote youth exchange and mobility in Africa and between Africa and Europe with more than 970 million euro, once again through regional cooperation and Erasmus+, but also through the Intra-Africa Academic Mobility Program. Another example is the regional teacher program, where we try to increase the quality of the teachers in terms of their work in the educational system. These are, say, few examples of what we are doing in terms of education. Just to give you figures, when we were discussing for the conclusion of the summit, one of the elements that was coming out was that, for instance, in 2020, more than 200,000 African students were present per year in Europe. It's clear that it's not this that is going to solve the problem of the higher education, but I think that now with the new technologies, with the possibility of connecting people, not only physically, but in a digital way, I think that we have a huge opportunity to establish what could be an Europe-African campus, if I may say, where the students and the teachers and the professor from the two continents can work around subjects and areas that have been highlighted before, where we can work together around common challenges in order to cope with the challenges that we have to face together, because we are living all in the same world. So I will stop here and maybe if there are questions at a later stage, happy to respond. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope you all the success in this, I would say, useful initiative of connecting the two continents at the academic level. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Rosa. And he will be open to answer questions after the panel. So we have a mutual Q&A session at the end of our panel. So we would now like to very warm welcome and introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Hirut Woldemariam. She is a professor at the Department of Linguistics and Philology at Addis Ababa University in Ethiopia. She has very broad experience in taking up various leadership positions, ranging from academic institutions to high-level ministerial posts. She has served her university in many years at the top management level in functions such as Vice Rector for International Affairs, Academic Affairs, and Strategic Planning. And then she has been appointed to take up ministerial positions in the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, and among them being the Minister for Science and Higher Education. and she has received several different prestigious awards, such as the Research Award for Senior Scientists from the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. And she has also earned her degree in Cologne, so this is the connection to our university, and she has been coming back to our campus for many, many reasons, and today we are very delighted that she has come to Cologne to render our keynote address on empowering female scientists in Africa, a prerequisite for sustainable and inclusive development. Welcome, Professor Mori, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for such a generous introduction, first of all. Good morning, everyone. And I should tell you that I'm very much pleased, honored, and delighted to be part of this prestigious Coimbra conference and to be able to get the opportunity to present a keynote speech on empowering female scientists in Africa, a prerequisite for sustainable and inclusive development. I mean, it's a topic very much close to my heart, and I'm very much passionate about this subject since long, being an African academician and woman leader from the university to high government level. So, oh, I'm sorry, it's not displaying, is it? Okay. Maybe in the interest of time, I should continue giving the talk, or at least introducing the outline of my presentation. This is how I organize my talk. First of all, I will give you the overall trend in women's position in general, worldwide and in Africa, not just in science and academia, but in other sectors as well, because it's no different what we see in the academia concerning women. And then specifically on the status of women in science, what's going on, what's the problem, and what needs to be done. And what are the factors or the causes for the current situation and the representation of women in science, innovation, technology. Oh, it's here, thank you. And then I'll take you to the reasons. Why do we need to empower female scientists and to change the situation? Why do we care about that, first of all? Is it for the sake of just women, or something bigger will happen if we do that? And then how exactly are we going to do it, to empower women, to give them the space? Because they belong to the 50% of the overall population, and disregarding women means, using only half the capacity of the society and trying to expect change or success. So this is important, and then I'll finally give you conclusive remarks. So there are so many research outputs currently demonstrating and confirming that women, girls, are actually disadvantaged in all respects, economically, socially, culturally, and politically. Not just in Africa, but across the world, globally. But the magnitude is high when you come to Africa because of its traditions, cultures, and stereotypes. Women experience a higher risk of poverty, social exclusion, discrimination, and violence than the general population. This is also well documented and researched fact. I can give you the numbers, but it's not important right now. They're underrepresented, not just in science, but elsewhere. For example, according to Bloomberg 2020, only 6% of women professionals globally are taking up CEO positions, leadership positions, decision-making positions. Only 6%. The rest, 94, are serving only at a lower status, not a senior, as experts and so on. And only 18.2 board of directors globally are women. This is according to World Economic Forum. So you can see it's a fact that women are not there, they are invisible, they are not contributing to sustainable development goals. That's why we are lagging behind. I think I'll come back to that in details. According to the UN report with regard to leadership, global leadership, only 21% of ministerial positions globally are occupied by women. 21% of ministerial positions are given for women. What's going on? And only 3 countries have 50% women in their parliaments to make decisions on important agenda. And only 22 countries have women heads of states or heads of governments as prime minister or government. Only 22 out of 195 nation states in the world. So it's obvious and it's visible. Women are not there where they are needed. Why they are needed, I'll tell you later. According to Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General's report on March 8, 2021, at the current rate of progress, gender equality will not be reached among heads of government until 2150. That means we need to have another 130 years to see 50% women government leaders in our world. So, I mean, as you know, this is SDG Goal 5, empowering women and girls and ensuring gender equality. But where are we now? We're left with only less than 10 years, but we are lagging behind. So if we are not inclusive enough to have women in science, in leadership, and in other sectors, how do we ever expect results, you know, and fulfillment with our plans? So that's the overall trend, and as I mentioned it earlier, Sustainable Development Goal, Agenda 5, is gender equality. We have to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. But now, with under 10 years left to meet it, or, you know, the world is not on track. We're not on track. We're lagging behind. Actually, studies show that we're backlashing, going back in certain areas with regard to gender equality. Very interesting report 2022 from UN Women. It says, of course, there are excuses here and there, the intersecting crisis of COVID-19, the climate emergency, and rising economic and political insecurity, you know, and so on. Progress on gender equality has not only failed, but moved forward and has begun to reverse back. Not only failed to move forward, but also has begun to reverse. So if change continues as it is in the current rate, gender equality will remain unrealized for centuries to come. And this is a very sad, bad news, honestly. Such another 286 years to reform legal frameworks to promote, enforce, and monitor gender equality. That's why we really need to focus and work on this issue. More than 1 in 10 women are subjected to sexual and physical violence and harassment, 12.5%. And child marriage, we're looking forward to end child marriage by 2030, but progress must be 17 times faster, speedier than it is now if we want to really achieve that. That's what it shows. Coming to science, the status of women in science, where I'd like to focus on. Women are underrepresented in science, technology, engineering and mathematics team. We see an average of 1 to 4 when compared to men, 1 to 4 women are working in this field. And according to UNESCO 2020, less than 30 of the world's researchers are women, only less than 30%. And only 11% of senior research roles are held by women. This is the global statistics given out by UNESCO. That's not the case, but also further, women's work rarely gains the recognition it deserves, unfortunately, even if we have few women and doing a lot, producing, but still their works gain less visibility. So since 1901, there have been over 300 recipients of the Nobel Prize in Sciences, but only 10 of them, that means 3%, have been women awarded Nobel Prize in Science so far, according to UNESCO's report towards 2030. So if you come to Africa, the number of women in science and engineering, mathematics in Africa is even below 20, very low. Even though women make up over 50% of the population. Population is 50-50, but less than 20% of the women are engaged in science, engineering and mathematics, and academia, technology, innovation fields. This percentage goes even down, reduces further when you look at the leadership positions and graduate levels of education in science. Speaking about factors or reasons for that, well, first of all, in Africa, girls have very limited access to education. Limited access. They don't go to school. A large number of girls are out of school currently. Millions of them. For so many reasons, especially in the rural areas. I mean, a poor family with, many kids in the house, if they have to send 1 or 2 children to school, then they decide the boys should go and, the girls should stay at home and help their mothers and so on. There are also dropouts, high number of dropouts because of early marriage and other, social, economic reasons. Girls drop out, and the completion rate for the girls is very high, low. Another reason is, the negative stereotypes, the cultural stereotypes in Africa that provides restrictive social roles, still operating in a settled and a covered way. Though we have constitutions and policies that states, we should empower women and girls and so on. But still, in practice, in the implementation issue, that there is gendered division of labor assigned by the society, by the culture, by the family. Woman is for domestic sphere, giving birth, taking care of the family, managing home, but men for public sphere, science, leadership, and so on. This is how people think deep down. So gender-based expectations of actors also play a big role, like parents, teachers, career guidance advisors, decision makers, women themselves, girls themselves, they carry this stereotype, and that's affecting them from going forward. So this resulted in unequal access of girls in education, science, technology, and leadership. And the judgment of excellence by parents, teachers, even by peer groups is also affected by the stereotypes. There's high level of misrecognition and misconceptions of the value of female. Female women themselves underestimate their potentials. I've seen that myself. But men overestimate their potentials. You can see that in the recruitment process when you do interviewing and so on. Men are very confident, they overestimate. Actually, some of them have inflated kind of self-image. But women, in the contrary, they have a very low self-image and esteem about their potential. So in recruitment, in appointment, promotion, even in pay, you see that. So preferential evaluation and treatment is given to boys and men everywhere. In the interview, they say, oh, he's significantly more competent and hireable. The committee decides. She might be less available. She might, give birth and she will be busy taking care of her kids and so on. So she might be less committed to the job. So there is a risk in having women in a senior scientific position or leadership position. So the tendency is to go for the men. It's discrimination. But then, actually, women are multitasked. Even though their tasks are not considered, the contribution is underestimated. Besides, pregnancy, breastfeeding, caretaking put women in a disadvantaged position naturally, and there is no allowance for the specific burden of women given in their workplace also. And women had to perform more actually to eliminate the mistrust that they are less available, less committed to the job. So women are, they are overburdened. They shoulder huge burden of domestic responsibilities with the kids, with the husband, the parents, and so on. So they have, even if they are in the field of science, they have less time to work in the labs, to attend conferences and build networks, and they lag behind. And there is also lack of support system in Africa, and there is the culture of mentorship is very bad. We have very poor culture of mentorship. Actually, some members have fierce competition with each other rather than supporting each other. But we see men having clubs and alliances and giving advice to each other, guidance, information on their professional areas, as well as the subtle institutional politics, how to get promotion, how to go for it, which way to follow. They share information a lot. But women, first of all, they don't have even the time. They have to run home for their kids or for their family. They don't join hands. They don't, exercise mentorship. Lack of role models is also hindering women's career progress. That's true also in science. The power of example in mathematics, it. If you have an example, then you follow that and do your exercises in maths. The women in Africa especially, there is no one ahead of them to follow, to look up to. Lack of role models. So they're not encouraged. If there is no woman who did it before, then how could I try even? And they're easily discouraged. So lack of role models, that's also another thing. But then, okay, let's move to the next title. Why do we empower? We have to empower. We have to change the situation if we really want sustainable, inclusive development for our globe. Why? Number one, it's an issue of social justice. This is social injustice, what's going on now. It's a basic, a fundamental human right. Women, is also a human being, and she can perform and exercise whatever others do. She has to be given all the opportunities. But then it's a prerequisite for accelerated development. Ending all discrimination against women and girls is not only a basic human right, but it's crucial for a sustainable future. Because we're wasting women's capacity. There's a tremendous wastage of the world's human potential. Women's potential has been put in the trash basket. In most of the cases, I'm sorry to say it. It's a waste. It's unutilized, unique perspective or talent or wisdom, skill that women have. It's not been utilized. We're downgrading a big pool of talent, mind you, to the sidelines, and then still expect progress. So what are we missing? We're missing complete understanding of the state of our planet. It would have been complete if women and men worked together on that to understand our environment, our planet, and so on. We're missing a possible solution addressing the global challenge because of that. We're missing the essential strategy for sustainable development, a key to a more prosperous and peaceful world, because we're disregarding women. That means we are using half the perspective of our citizens. We are using half the insights. And then what should we expect? Of course, half the result, half the solution, and half the development. It's clear, because we are using half an input. So it's just not for moral or social grounds that we need to involve women, but the unique perspectives of women scientists and women knowledge holders, including indigenous and traditional knowledge in Africa, possessed by women, need to be incorporated, integrated into solution to the various challenges of advancing sustainable and equitable development. So in total, the world needs science, innovation, technology to address its problems, and science needs women. There are a number of research outputs coming out recently. It says research shows that establishments with more women on their boards outperform those without by a significant margin, even in business. And organizations with greater gender diversity among senior leaders are showing more profitable. And diversity, of course, in all its forms, inspires new ideas and fosters innovation. So men and women approach issues differently. We know that from our families and homes. We approach things differently, due to their, of course, varied life experience. So different perspectives offer different lengths of growth, and women-led, it's not by chance that women-led countries handled COVID-19 far better during the COVID season. Women-led countries and nations did much better, performed much better with handling the crisis of COVID-19. I don't think that's just an accident. There's something there. According to a study in Harvard, a recent study, women's quality leadership and other areas have been listed down as imaginative perspectives. Women have imaginative perspectives. They're highly creative, nurturing. They used to, nurture their kids and so on, and meticulous. They have sense of finer details. Wise leadership, inclusive in their leadership style. They are less authoritative and more cooperative, and they focus on finding solutions, and they have higher sense of responsibility, quick to adjust to new situations, passionate, enthusiastic, and motivating. We need these qualities. So we have to, both men and women should work together because we complement each other. So the world must lose no time to embrace women scientists and women leaders. But then how? How do we empower? What are the ways, the pathways for that? Bigger is education. It's a cornerstone of equality. The first step towards a more gender equal world. So we have to ensure girls' participation, and not only participation, but also completion and success in education. And empowering girls with the necessary education, life skills, and mindset is vital for them to become thriving women. But then we have to fix our institutions, our system, and our society. We have to establish gender-friendly policy frameworks and enabling environments at workplace, and universities, and colleges, and so on. Why don't we offer child care services in the college so that a woman scientist can, leave her baby and then focus with her research in the laboratory? And funding for training and mentorship should be also enhanced. Involving women in leadership and decision-making bodies in science boards, recruitment and promotion committees, and evaluation panels will also be important in our institutions. But awareness creation, not to discriminate against female should also be worked. So we have to fix the world, we have to fix the society, we have to fix the system so that women can take part in the development process and engagement. And mentorship would also be important. I mentioned it earlier. We have to establish and enhance systems in which senior women scientists mentor, coach, guide, motivate the young ones. Networking based on each scientific field, interactions with the peer grouping, sharing experience, sharing knowledge, information, provide each other with advice, support and motivate each other, leverage for collective power for change. So we need to have women scientist networks in Africa and elsewhere. There are a few of them coming up now. We have to encourage and support them. Most of them are, suffering from lack of funding and support and attention. So I think we should help them to progress. So, for example, we have African Women in Science, designed by Women for Women, supporting the interests, needs, and goals of early career scientists and so on. So networking is important. And then we have to popularize and recognize role models. The few role models we have, we have to bring them to the front and popularize them, recognize them, acknowledge them. That will help. Deploying role models can boost girls' participation in science and act as mentors and motivating young girls by sharing their success stories. So let the society see what women can do by doing that. And let women see what women can do so that they can be multiplied. But women themselves have also to perform more, to be honest. It's not because women are weak that I'm saying this, but to eliminate the mistrust that they are less available, less committed, and so on, the stereotype. They have to prove themselves. That means they have to do double or triple of what their male counterparts are doing. Unfortunately, it's a lot of burden, but women can do that. They can do double and triple if they get a proper environment in order to break the stereotype and misconceptions. They have to enhance self-confidence. So the women should work continuously on self-development. Every single day, we have to tell ourselves that we can do it. Overcome our insecurities and fears. Women are strong, but problem is either they lack confidence on themselves or others lack confidence on them. That's a serious problem. So we have to work on that. We should also learn to stand firm and ignore negative voices. There are negative voices around, especially if you are a woman and get some place, some position. All eyes are on you, and all negative voices are around. So women should, and so that's why many women drop out, resign from their positions. So we have to endure unfavorable environments and challenge the stereotypes. One story I want to share you here, and then I will come to end. With regard to this managing negative voices, there was a competition among frogs climbing a mountain, hiking, and there were attendants, spectaculars down at the bottom. And when one frog went up, and people, from the audience says, oh, she's going to fail now. She's not going to make it. She'll fail, yeah. And then she fails immediately. And then the other one strapped, went upper, managed, and then again they start, oh no, she's not going to make it, she's going to, and she fell. One by one, each and every frog fell down to death. But then one frog, she made it straight up to the top of the mountain. They were shouting and so, but nothing happened to her. She did it, she made it, despite the negative voice around. And then there came a journalist trying to interview her to know her secret and say, what's your secret? How did you manage? How did you make it? She didn't respond. Nothing. And he repeated, how did you make it? And then he found out that she was deaf. So she didn't take any negative input or information. Actually, she was thinking that they were clapping for her and supporting and encouraging her, that she's doing well. That was how she took it. So sometimes we have to be deaf to the negative voices around if you have to succeed as a woman because of the various challenges and stereotypes surrounded us. And then we have to make, of course, careful work-life balance, time management, budgets, spend time wisely and economically, more seriously than we budget our money, actually, for a woman. That's how I see it. That's my experience. Because money comes and goes, but time, once you miss it, forget it, yeah. You have to do what you have to do today with your time. So plan well, prioritize daily activity. This works for all. And then delegate, get support from family and others to cope with the challenge of childcare and other social and family responsibilities. And in conclusion, well, female scientists can play a crucial role in the progress and sustainability of our globe if they are empowered through proper quality education and given employment opportunities, and through changing the social stereotypes that restrain them in workplaces and in universities and schools. Institutions need to be better adapted to the social needs and interests of all members of the society. Of course, they should take into consideration what women need to be successful. Therefore, both men and women should work toward the same vision and goal together, of which addressing the crisis of climate change and resource scarcity are part. So, to close it, I will quote Antonio Guterres' statement. We can all do our part to unleash our world's enormous untapped talent, starting with filling our classrooms, our laboratories, and boardrooms with women scientists. This is crucial. This is what we're missing for us to achieve our goals. We have to embrace the 50% of our population, not just in Africa, but elsewhere in the world. The problem is shared, though it is more serious in our case because of the cultural and other elements. Thank you very much. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much for this very interesting, very insightful, and very inspiring talk. And we will hear from you more at this panel, so you are invited to stay right here on stage, because we are turning now to our panel discussion. And I turn over give the floor now to our moderator for that panel, Professor Kirk, He's a professor of law at the University of Cologne and director of the Environmental Law Center. And his research includes work in Ethiopia and Cameroon, and he has previously worked on faculties in the UK and at the Dublin City University. So he will moderate now this first panel just before the coffee break, and he will also introduce the following additional panelists here on stage. So I welcome to the stage now Professor Janke. Professor Woldemariam is already here. Professor Henk Kummeling from the University of Utrecht, Professor Nairn from the University of Bristol, and Dr. Nguemo from the University of Cologne. Welcome to the stage, and welcome to our moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Veal, for the introduction and the opportunity to be part of our conference. Let's talk. For the next hour, our talking will be with our panelists here on the stage, and then for an hour after that, or a bit less than an hour after that, we have a coffee break. And I'm reminded of the fact that students often come to me after class and they ask brilliant questions, and there's only two of us standing there. And so I would encourage you to treat the next part of our conference as not being those students who wait for the coffee break to talk to our panelists, but to use the opportunity to ask them questions now so that everybody benefits from hearing your brilliant questions and their even more brilliant answers. The panelists that we have with us today, we've already been introduced to Professor Hirut Woldemariam. I will only add to that she's professor of linguistics in addition to her government work, and that I have a brilliant doctoral student in linguistics from Ethiopia who may be here today. Daginet, are you here? I can't see in the glare, he may be here as well. And then we should go on, I think, and meet the rest of our panel, and I'm happy to introduce, I will just go in this direction across the room. Professor Henk Kummeling is a rector magnificus at the University of Utrecht, which is a neighbor university to Cologne here in this part of Europe. And as a lawyer myself, I'm happy also to tell you he's a distinguished professor of constitutional law. And it is his research in constitutional law that connects his work as a rector in higher education and research in the Caribbean and in Africa. When he is at home, he is also, however, president, or has been president of the Dutch Electoral Council. So like Professor Woldemariam, he works at the university, he works in government, and when he's permitted, he teaches in the classroom and conducts research. You're very welcome, Professor Kummeling. Then sitting next to him is Professor Agnes Nairn. She is Pro-Vice Chancellor for Global Engagement and Chair of Marketing at the University of Bristol. Her previous roles include Dean of Hult International Business School in London and Professor of Marketing at Lyon Business School in France. In her role as PVC for Global Engagement, she is currently engaged in setting up strategic partnerships on the African continent. And that work is underpinned by a co-created charter framework for advancing academic research collaborations with Africa to contribute to the global production of knowledge. And my colleague from the University of Cologne will be the last person I introduce here. My colleague from the University of Cologne is Dr. Filomain Nguemo. He's an associate professor in medicine here at the UniCurl, and is a research group leader in stem cells, molecular biology, and electrophysiology. In addition, he was formerly a teaching assistant at the Department of Animal Physiology at the Universities of Yaoundé and Chang in Cameroon, and he has already initiated cooperations between our University of Cologne and the University of Chang and the University of Dakar. So the way we will proceed this morning, right now, for our formal question period is, first we'll hear a brief statement from each of the panelists, and then we open the floor to the audience. And please, don't be like the student who waits for the coffee break, but let us all hear what your questions are so that we can all benefit from them. So we'll go in the same order again then. Henk, if you would like to begin, please, with your statement.
Thank you very much, Kirk. Yeah, well, I'm not so much here in a statement mode as more as in a learning mode, because also our university, a Western type university, high-ranked university in Europe, has a lot to learn when it comes to collaboration, cooperation with our African colleagues. And the reason why we have to learn a lot is because that, as many of our universities did up until recently, we saw the rankings as the drivers of our success. And yeah, if you take these rankings as the drivers of success, you drive in the wrong direction. Wrong direction in two senses, in fact. You don't partner up with the real important partners. What we did was indeed looking for similar universities, let's say the mirroring of what we were, high-ranked partners in all kinds of parts of the world, but not the partners that we are really relevant in the sense that we have a mission, and each university has a mission. And of course, our mission is indeed also to contribute to the betterment of the world. We want to contribute to come up with solutions for solving the real big issues, the big global issues, societal issues of the world. And then you need to partner up with other universities, with other knowledge institutions. And therefore, we really changed course over the last years and said, well, we have to put extra money, put extra effort in our collaboration with other universities. And indeed, well, of course, the main focus already mentioned here this morning is about SDGs. And some would argue, and they do also in my university, these are too vague, and they are too broad, and they are too politicized, but they indeed offer some common ground that we can work on. I think that's very important for us, and making sure that we really work on these is indeed the way forward through equitable partnerships. And we can wait for the European Commission, we can wait for our national governments, we can wait for all kinds of policy instruments on the international level, but in our university we said to ourselves, we have to do things ourselves, make the next step. And we did all kinds of things we'll talk about later, but I think that if you see this responsibility, you have to live up to these standards and do something about picking up that challenge of establishing real collaborations with partners also on the African continent. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Henk. Just building on that, I wanted to talk about research partnerships between the Global North and Africa, and about the deep, very deep power imbalances between the Global North and Africa, and why we need to do something exactly. And I want to talk a little bit about a charter that's being proposed to address those power imbalances. And I think those power imbalances are important because actually pretty much all of the research that's done in Africa is done with a partner in the Global North, over 85% in fact, which means that collaboration with the Global North defines the state of Africa in the global knowledge production system, and it defines it in a negative way. And so we need to redress that power imbalance, not just because it's wrong, but also because it affects the African economy and it affects all of us in terms of having Africa in science. Just like we need women in science, we need the African continent in the knowledge production system. And at the moment, we really don't. Talking about the rankings, there are no African universities in the top 200. The nearest is the University of Cape Town at 237. And only South Africa, Egypt, and Tunisia feature in the top 1,000. Likewise, only 16 out of 6,000 top scholars are from Africa, and again, most of them are from South Africa and from white South African universities. We've heard about the population of Africa. 10% of the world's adult population is from Africa. Only 0.7% of our research outputs come from there. So there's a really massive imbalance, but somehow we don't really question it. And where do these imbalances come from? Well, I think there's 4 places where these imbalances come from. And the first one is the knowledge frameworks, the theories, the concepts. They tend to come from the West, and they tend to be unquestionably from the North and the West. So we're not looking at African ways of knowing, African knowledge. We're also not looking at African language. You talked about language and how language can be used in a different way. Things like the concept of Ubuntu, for example, doesn't particularly feature in the West or the North. So the knowledge frameworks put Africa at a disadvantage. The languages used put Africa at a disadvantage. And so does this thing called the development frame of looking at things, which tends to imply a gaze from the North down towards the African continent and the South. And it's pretty unusual for that gaze to be reversed. We don't see an awful lot of research done by Africa on the problems that are faced in the North. That the gaze is almost exclusively one way, and that's a problem. And then there's funding. We've heard already that a lot of funding comes from the European Union to Africa. It also comes from a lot of American funders, the US Department of Health and Human Services, the Wellcome Trust, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And of course, these funders are also using the same development frame, which means that what gets funded in Africa tends to be health research. It doesn't tend to be high tech. It doesn't tend to be 6G. It doesn't tend to be astrophysics, because the agenda is the agenda of the global North, because those are the people that are funding. And the projects tend to be one-off, discrete projects, not long-term ones, which means that the capacity building is missing. So that imbalance has led to a dependence, really. And at the same time, the practical arrangements on the ground for research partnerships are then reproduced. So the division of labor. How often is the principal investigator on an African project actually an African scholar? And how often is it a scholar from the North? Decision making, who decides what the project should be? Surely that should be Africa-centered. Where does the budget sit? Does the budget sit in a Northern university, or does the budget sit in an African university? And access to rewards. How often is the African author the first author? How often are they the ones that get to win the prizes? So I think there are these 4 major imbalances, and that has a really bad impact on the African economy, because universities, of course, produce a huge amount for each of our domestic economies. They allow soft power in being part of global agenda, and Africa's not able to do that. So we need a charter and a framework, and I think what that charter and a framework will do is bring together networks like Coimbra, networks around the world, our funders, our politicians, to look at this quite seriously. So we need to include local ways of knowledge in every project that we do. We need to include African language and concepts in every project that we do. We need to reverse the development gaze in every project that we do. And we need to make sure that resourcing is resource for what Africa wants to research and not what the global North wants it to do. So there is this charter which has been co-created on the African continent, together with the Association of African Universities, the African Research University Alliance, the Inter-University Council for East Africa, the Association for West African Universities, the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa, and the Africa Academy of Sciences. So it's kind of covered all the bases. And these bodies have come together to co-create a new charter that articulates the principles that I've talked about, the goals at each of these levels of knowledge and practice, and some guiding frameworks. It's been facilitated by the Perivoli Africa Research Centre in Bristol, along with the University of South Africa and the University of Cape Town. We'll be launching this charter on the 5th of July in Namibia. I'm very glad that Julien from Coimbra is going to be coming to that. And I would be very happy to talk to anyone more about the process of the Charter and invite anyone to sign up, because we've got quite a big job ahead of us in order to redress these power imbalances that exist on so many levels. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to give a follow-up of what has been just said, especially with regard to the power imbalance and poor capacity in African higher education system that affects also partnerships and collaborations to fully utilized. African universities face multi-layered constraints currently. I mean, it's a young sector, first of all. Higher education in Africa is a recent development, but this huge expansion and development is actually very, very recent phenomenon. So there is a lack of resources and capacities, both human as well as material capacities for meeting the basic demands of higher education, leave alone high-level or advancing research and training support. So inadequate resources, poor infrastructure, unqualified and also unmotivated academic staff because of low salary and incentive. Academic staff is not that much enthusiastic currently, especially the case of Ethiopia. And also poor leadership and governance system, and very poor research and innovation outputs and infrastructures. This and more hinder African higher education not to contribute adequately to sustainable development, also to make it, to make a fruitful and effective cooperation and partnership with the global South. So I think what we need to do is to complement with each other and support and capacitate, first of all, African higher education before we go to a fruitful kind of cooperation. And Africa has also a lot to give for science and innovation, to be honest. Africa has a huge indigenous knowledge, untapped indigenous knowledge. Can be with medicine, with architecture, and with conflict resolution, and so, in so many areas we have thousands of years of knowledge, not used, not utilized, just locked out. So, I mean, we can complement, I can say, and also the biodiversity and the huge youth population in Africa has a potential for the future global development, but it needs to be carefully and wisely managed and used. So I think we should find a way for us to mutually benefit from the cooperation. In most cases, African institutions are expecting from the South institutions just to get money, to get capacity building services and programs. No, the recipient position, that's where they are. Just need support and, care to be given. And that's wrong. So we have to stand on equal footing and then try to complement and benefit from the partnership and relationship at the same time. Thank you.
So, thanks. I would first like to say something about the place where we are now, the University of Cologne. We have to mention, or I have to mention, that this is a place to be, because it's the University of Diversity, the University of Consolidation, Solidarity, and Integration. So it is most important because we are talking about sustainability. and this is part of the vision, as the Vice Rector mentioned, the strategy of the university. Let me put it into context. It is not a secret that the nature has formed a world where we live all together inside. But what war activity generate impact on this society, we have to think about. We break some oxygen. This is life. Just imagine that in one time, one point, we do not have oxygen. That life will stop. You have to be this oxygen in this world. Means if you are not there, the life will stop. We have to take this into consideration as first element to mention one place in this world for the sustainability. Talking about Africa, many things has been said, but I will just add some very important element. Support, funding has been provided since 16 years nearly, but there is not a really concrete result in the field today after 16 years. Maybe this is one of the reasons why we are here, to try to find a way to better organize. But we have to take into consideration the mistake that we made yesterday to better plan what will be tomorrow. But first we have to mention that today. And to mention it today, it is the responsibility of you. It's not just the responsibility of the University of Cologne. It's not just the responsibility of one university. It's the responsibility of all 40 universities sitting here in this room and discuss what should be done for the better future of our life. We already mentioned several aspects that has to be done. Yes, it has to be done. How it has to be done? We have to accept each other first. Accept the diversity, the way to think from other, and accept the other education way she mentioned, language, and so on. The list is very long. But the education comes first in the first position. Why? Because I don't want to go back to what the President Nelson Mandela said. Education is the weapon, the power weapon that can change the world. Taking this aspect, we do not only want to educate African population, African continent. No. Europe also has the responsibility to learn from Africa, to be educated in the African way. It is only in this situation that we can better know how Africa is, and to better plan how Africa will be tomorrow and how we will go with Africa tomorrow. We mentioned collaboration, and I want to address one important thing. If I just take the example of my grandmom sitting on my village at this time, he burned something. Maybe she burned the forest because she wants to get some better food. My mom would not stop that if she do not have any plan B that will really avoid her to do that. She has first to know why I have to stop that. Means she needs to be educated. I also sitting here teaching, I also try to bring also my culture in other place. This is time of some kind of education. Means wherever we are, wherever and everywhere we are working, we have to deal with education. Education is not a plan that has to be established and teach in the school or at the university level, but education is something that we have to learn, knowledge. And knowledge means you get some skill. And skill today should be go in the direction, not only for you as a person, but you always have to think about what I'm doing now has to have an impact on the society. And to do that, you have to look back. What has been my obstacle? Which obstacle I met? If you are able to identify those obstacles and try to get the solution to those obstacles, you will make the way free for those come behind you. So this is the way how we have to deal with all these components when we talk about sustainability. So it is very important. So to summarize myself, poverty, health, education, gender, quality, inequality, water and sanitary, energy, economic growth, industry, innovation, infrastructure, consumption, production, climate change, water and land, peace and justice, and global partnership are among things that we have really to put on the table and to find a way how to do. The last point that I want to mention is African diaspora. I'm one of the African diaspora. One point that I have to point out is that I identified that the main partnership do not go really in the nice way because we do not identify, or we did not identify the right way to do it. And the right way to do for me in Europe is to use the African diaspora. They have to be involved everywhere, every time when talking about Africa, because they know the culture, they know the system in both sides, in Europe and in Africa. This is how things can better move forward. Of course, we have diaspora that has spent some time in Europe and went back to Africa. Of course, this is a good bridge to be used and to really put in the sustainable way the partnership. There is something that we have to put in mind. When talking about Africa, most of the time, we have less negative and so on. Just try to turn the direction and get a different perspective about Africa. And this is why most of the leadership in the world, they mention it, Africa is the future. Let us really keep out and put the concrete strategy plan, Europe, Africa. Otherwise, we'll face the same mistake that was performed for 16 years. With that, thank you for your attention.
Begin to take questions from the audience then. Thank you, panelists, for your statements. I would like to invite Dr. Domenico Rosa to return to the stage so that we can also ask him questions. Dr. Rosa, would you like to make an additional statement, or we should take your presentation from earlier today as your statement?
Well, just to make some additional point, having listened to the different panelists, is the fact that we are definitely working in the direction that was mentioned by under the different aspects. And there is a specific element that we have a specific pilot project to promote and develop, I would say, research of African young scientists through a program where we try to, I would say, give the possibility to the young scientists to promote their own researches. It's a pilot project that is called RISE. I think it's a little bit a name that we use very often when we try to promote something new. And last year we awarded 44 researchers with a grant of 500,000 euro to, I would say, promote their own researches. It's managed by the African Academy of Science that is based in Nairobi, and is definitely going in the direction that was mentioned, that we have to try to develop an African offer in terms of scientific production. And I think that definitely we are moving this direction. Of course, we are not able to solve all the problem, but we try to put some seeds, at least, that are going in the direction that was mentioned by the different panelists. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your statement. And how is it that we're going to invite questions from the audience? Do we have microphones to send around, or do we think the audience members can be heard without a microphone? Okay. So let's begin. This is the part where we all get to be good students and benefit all the other audience members with our questions. While people are collecting their thoughts, perhaps I can mention something that I've been thinking of, because Professor Woldemariam pointed out to us the number of years that UNESCO says it will take at our current pace to achieve the things we want to do. We put it together with what Dr. Nguemo pointed out to us, that the place is important. The time is also important. We're not going to get from where we are to where we want to be immediately. And I think we have to be sort of realistic about what we want to achieve. So the provocation I would like to suggest is, here we are in Cologne, Africa is meeting Europe, and we're all speaking English. When and what would we see in Europe that would be Africa in Europe rather than Europe in Africa? Because we've already talked about that. What might we see? We've already heard from Professor Woldemariam that when we look to things that are African, we might look to superior dispute settlement, for instance. We speak too often, perhaps, in terms of economy only. But I've had the opportunity to be in the presence of former President Jose Manuel Barroso on 3 occasions. When he was asked if the European Union is working, he said, yes, we haven't had another world war. He didn't talk about economics. So I think there are things to talk about that we could say would be present in Europe that are African if we're serious about what we're talking about here. So that's my little provocation to hopefully get some questions generated. Yes, please, gentleman here.
Thank you. I will go and stand up first. Before we touched upon a presentation about women in science, leadership positions, and most of the numbers that were generated in this presentation were more about women in general. And I also had the question maybe to, do you see a lot of differences between European women and African women? And do you think there's a lot to gain there as well in challenges? And
Thank you. Can you tell us who you are, please?
Oh yeah, sorry. My name is Jeffrey van Sluis. I'm a representative of University of Groningen and the president of ESN Groningen.
Thank you very much. Now we need another microphone.
Yeah, it's a good question. Generally speaking, the problems are worldwide and global. Problem with women scientists, women leaders, and women students, academic staff, and so on. But then, the situation in Africa is worse, I can say. is more complicated and more serious than the rest of the world, basically because of the cultural stereotypes and religion and other aspects. It's more heavier for women in Africa than elsewhere. Otherwise, most of the things are commonly shared, that we have only like 30% of women scientists and researchers across the world, according to UNESCO's report. But when you come to Africa, it's even less than 20%. So it starts from bottom up, down, primary education level, and the problem increases when you go up to the ladder, to the senior scientific position and leadership position. Women are completely invisible, you can say. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Would anyone else in the panel like to address the question? Yes, please.
Yeah, well, I think that I completely agree with you when it comes to, let's say, the situation that is worse for the women on the African continent. But on a more general level, I have to admit that many of the cases that you presented goes for women in Europe still as well. When it comes to the percentage of female full professors, when it comes to the position in leadership. Just last week we had a meeting of the Dutch Rectors Assembly, and we came to the conclusion that only in 2007 we saw the first female rector in Utrecht, not in Utrecht, I'm still male, it was in Amsterdam. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but the amazing thing is, and I think that there's some possibility to learn there as well. If you look in Europe, and you were talking about the fact that a very low percentage of women were in STEM areas. If you look in Europe, that you see that in Scandinavian countries and in Italy, or for instance in Eastern Europe part of Europe, you see much more women in these areas of science. And in fact, we hired quite recently some female professors from Italy. And we have to learn there as well, because why is it possible that in certain parts of Europe there is a culture where it's quite ordinary that women go into these science areas as well, while in other parts, like in the Netherlands, they go to humanities, social sciences, and other types of science.
Thank you. Any other panels? Yes, please. Agnes.
Yeah, we've just got our first female rector or vice chancellor as well at the University of Bristol, which we are very pleased about. I suppose two things. I mean, talking about the continent of Africa, obviously it's a huge place, and there are probably very different challenges in different countries. So maybe breaking the issue down a bit helps. The other thing, I think, it is different in different places, and I think we have to embed things into our systems for there to be a change. So, for example, in Bristol, if we want to recruit someone either from a different ethnic group to enable diversity that you say exists in Cologne, or to have more female professors, for example, all things being equal in a recruitment process, we will then privilege in a kind of positive discrimination. And I think by being sometimes people feel uncomfortable about that. But if you actually want to make a change, I think you have to make it systematically embedded inside the system. And that's one thing that we do at Bristol at the moment.
Before you put the microphone back down, is this contained in the charter in any way that you brought to our attention earlier?
The charter doesn't, no, it's dealing with working with Africa as opposed to gender-specific issues. It's an interesting question because gender doesn't feature in the charter, actually. So I suppose we were to bring together some of the things we've looked at today. Maybe that's something we should be looking at. You're absolutely right. Early career researchers and women researchers. Thank you. Because actually our charter is led by a woman. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, please. Yes, in the center. Challenge for getting the microphone to you.
Anyway. Hello, my name is Irinja Pakkanen and I'm coming from Finland, University of Turku. And my question is a little bit out of the box, but still inside the box. And it's about the word outside academia. Thank you for all the presentations and the comments, and I really liked the thing that you raised diaspora, and you raised what happened in order to get women and girls to the science, what has to happen outside academia, in the society itself. But now my question is, okay, coming from a country which is quite Nordic, in a way, not a lot of African inside in everyday's life. So I'm a little bit looking at the representatives of the European Commission and the European universities here. What could we do, or are there any plans that we can support Africa to meet Europe also outside academia, to be seen in TV's news, on culture, on social lives, in any connections in everyday's life? So are there any plans, and or are you already doing something for this kind of societal interaction, supporting Africa to meet Europe in everyone's life?
Panelists, please.
It's a really, really good question. And I think all of the universities in Coimbra are civic universities, so they're universities that are very much part of their cities. And I think, you know, part of being a civic university involves working with the diaspora. It's incredibly important. I mean, in Bristol, we're home to the largest Somali diaspora outside of London in the UK. And we, as a university, we have a global lounge where we invite civic partners as well as university partners to come and share, for example, religious ceremonies or celebrations, etc. So I think working with the diaspora, working with the mayors in the cities, for example, we do that quite a lot. Getting our students involved, we have our students involved. So students from a particular diaspora will go and work within the city, and positively doing outreach activities. So making sure that we want to reach out to communities and invite them into our universities. That's some of the things we do as a civic university, which I think everyone else here is.
To a certain extent, we do the same kind of things. We have all kinds of activities also organized by the municipality in which we participate in. But just as a warning, at least from my side, we should not overstretch our possibilities and our capabilities. The main goal that we have as a university is making sure that the diaspora that we see in our the Dutch community is also reflected and represented in our university. The Dutch former colonizer, Indonesia, Suriname, certain parts of Africa, and we see all these communities in our Dutch society, also children from Moroccan descent. We want to have them into our university, and that's the biggest effort that we have to organize at the moment before we can go further outside our community.
Thank you. Please, yes, Dr. Rosa.
Just taking one example as in the academy. So we have a huge impact outside academic activity. For example, I could not count how many times just that African community know that I'm at the University of Cologne. When someone have a bachelor or want to have orientation, they also contact me. This is some extra academic that is directly linked to the activity that we are carrying out here. So promoting also this diaspora, make them visible, impacted positively the population or the diaspora that do not have anything to do with the academy.
Yeah, I'd like to reflect on one point on this positive discrimination. To have more girls in the STEM program, that's quite interesting, and we used to have that in Ethiopia. Affirmative action, we call it. So we allow girls to join higher education with relatively lesser points and grades. But then, most of them, they don't succeed. They don't make it through, partly because of the stigmatization. There's a huge stigmatization going on. They say, well, she's here because of the girls' quota, otherwise she's not competent enough. So that's a serious issue, and I don't know how to handle that, but we really need such kind of room for girls, considering their poor preparation and cultural burden. But then now we are developing a new system, support system. Once they are in on campus, then we have the sisterhood kind of mentorship program where senior female students in the science advise and coach and mentor the junior ones and follow them up through. So that is also helping. So in addition to having them on board, it's also good to have a support mechanism and system for those women to make it through to the completion. I want to add that. And about the diaspora, yes, diaspora can contribute a lot to science, innovation, and education. In Ethiopia, when I was a minister for science and higher education, we established a network of diaspora. We made a call from across the world, Ethiopian diaspora, and various universities to join together. We have a network. We had a huge network, and we divided them actually in different subgroups: one research, education, female empowerment, and so on. So they were providing, new ideas and resources. They were even coming to Ethiopia and then give motivational speech, advise students with their thesis and so on, even online and not just physically, if they couldn't make it to come. So I think it's a huge resource. Africa has most of its human capital, educated one, outside Africa. There's a huge brain drain going on so far because things are not favorable enough. In remuneration very low, it's very low and small salary they have. So yeah, of course they don't want to stay and go, but still we can brain gain. We can have them back, not just physically, but also thanks to the technology with online and digital platforms. We can exploit them. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rosa.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think that the discussion on how to integrate other components into the partnership with Africa, and I think that we did an interesting experiment in the run-up of the summit last year when we decided to organize what we call the Africa-Europe Week. We can find the reference on the web. It was just a week devoted, I think, to all the aspects that could refer to the partnership. And in order to give a voice, in particular, to three specific stakeholders that were youth, civil society, and local authorities, we decided to organize and to give them the possibility, by organizing themselves around the subject of the summit, to give their input for the summit. This ended in 3, I would say, full day, where the youth on one side, the civil society organization on the other, and the local authorities managed to have, I would say, an in-depth discussion where the two sides, Africa and Europe, brought their own input to the discussion that was taking place at the official level with the head of state and government. In order also to make this interaction more lively, we invented a little bit a format that is called Meet the Leaders, where the representative of these three components, but this is something that could be enlarged at a later stage in the civil society, of course, diaspora is included, for instance, where there was this possibility to interact with the leaders that were part of the summit or were contributing to the agenda. As follow-up of this initiative that was meant for giving support and input to the summit, there is now we are now studying together with the African Union how to institutionalize and make this mechanism permanent in order to, I would say, inform, consult, and engage with stakeholders on a much more regular basis around the partnership that Europe has with Africa. So I think that we are definitely going in this sense. Of course, then you can imagine all the problems that we can have in terms of representativity, of legitimacy, and so on. But I think that the best way to address this is to entitle the stakeholders to organize themselves as they consider is the best way. And I think this was definitely a successful experience. Just to give you a figures, we were in February 2022, so at the end more or less of the pandemics. And in spite of, I would say, some digital fatigue, we managed to have more than 20,000 people attending the different events related to the Africa-Europe week.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rosa. Further questions? Our Prorector, Professor Bussa.
Thank you very much to all of you for these very thought-provoking comments, ideas, as well as also the measures and the beautiful language you have used to describe new pathways for how we can cooperate. Thank you very much for that. Perhaps perhaps it's a challenging comment or question. I'd like to come back to what you said about who sets norms, benchmarks, whom do we, measure ourselves against or with when we come to look at rankings or whatever it will be. It doesn't really matter. I think it relates to all sorts of human life, to say, well, this was good, or this was really productive, or this was forward-looking, this was transformative. It depends on, it can be anything. Now, I think with regard to rankings, the Dutch are probably very much advanced and say, well, we just do away with a few things. Other countries are not, other universities are not. Where are we? How do we do this? And are we really ready? I said that myself, to learn from Africa, to learn from, and we keep using a very generic term, Africa. It's diverse. Like Europe. Europe has an interesting history, to say the least, with regard to the colonial load we have. So, I mean, where are we? Where do we stand there? And to what extent are we ready to then learn? Are we suddenly having new benchmarks with regard to diversity? You mentioned the people-to-people approach, which I liked a lot. So, yeah, can you elaborate on that? I'm puzzled by this because I'm not really sure that how long will that take.
Okay. We have about 5 minutes, and I think some people in the room are very interested in coffee, so we'll take another question, and then the panelists can choose which they'd like to answer.
Hi, I'm Julien Bobino. I'm at the University of Jena in Germany, and I'm chair of the Cooperation Working Group in Coimbra Group. Almost all programs in AU-EU research funding are targeting excellency in a way, and excellency, as we see it here in the sense, is purely Eurocentric. So what can we do to reduce the danger of a gap between excellent universities in Africa and not excellent universities, and targeting the SDGs, equality, and inclusion in a general matter? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have 2 questions. Panelists, either question in any order? Oh, we have more? I'm sorry?
So Beatrix and Julien will see what question is the most interesting one.
It's the Eurovision question contest.
Yes. So my name is Kokun and I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Uppsala University, Sweden, not looking very Swedish though. We have several universities here present, I think, that are about to launch long-term clusters of excellence with the Arusha universities, and we are very much aligned on the EU-AU innovation agenda. And everybody knows that infrastructure is very crucial and very important, and we are happy to see that the Commission shares this idea. But we also know that there are so many different definitions and understandings of what is an infrastructure. going from networks, platforms, libraries, big facilities. So my question is, what kind of infrastructure would you see as the most important for future long-term collaboration?
Thank you very much. Well, panelists, now I'm put in the very dangerous position of trying to control you and making the audience unhappy. I would say that we go until 20 past. We have 3 excellent questions, which we've encouraged everybody to bring to our attention. It is a conference, so if we use the Latin word, we should be coming together to speak. Who would like to go first and tell us which question you're addressing?
I would like to address all 3 of them.
Very good. Wonderful.
Because they are very much interrelated, I think. The issue about the rankings. Rankings are here to stay. And we will need rankings also in the future. But the question is, what kind of rankings do we see as relevant for our behavior, for our mission? I specifically, and 2 people in the room that can confirm this, haven't used the word excellence over the past 5 years. Because it's so defined in a specific way, at least in some rankings, that it has a specific ring to it. And we are not, let's say, working on that type of ring anymore. And the same goes for making a difference. If you go to, let's say, what defines a career of a person, if you only take the metrics in research as being relevant for a career in university, then you go indeed once again in the wrong direction. I think that's a challenge for us here as a Coimbra group to come up with new frameworks. And perhaps the framework that you are working on could be a basis for, well, how do we assess ourselves? What are we doing? Are we making progress? Is some university doing better or more? What can we learn from it? So rankings are not something that's something like the weather or the outside world. Rankings are made by institutions like ourselves.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, and rankings are a business, let's face it. I mean, QS make a lot of money and then they sell us tools to be able to compete in their metrics. So at the end of the day, it's a bit of a game. But we're all playing it because it's who's going to jump first, I guess. Yeah, I'd quite like to take all 3 questions as well. So you're talking about benchmarks, and probably the QS rankings aren't necessarily the best ones. And you were talking about, are we ready to work together, because Africa's a continent with lots of countries. And then you said that Europe is made up of lots of voices. But there is a thing called the European Union. Sadly, we are not a member of it. But it exists, and it has a meaning for people who are externally. And I think at the moment, African voices are not sufficiently heard to be able to work out what it's going to look like, what an Africa-European alliance will look like. And I think are we ready? Well, when's anyone ever ready? But we have to hear more voices from the continent because the power imbalances are so great. So I think we need to hear those voices, which comes on to Julien's point about highly ranked universities and not so highly ranked universities. I know we've been very careful not to, and we have partnered with the University of Cape Town, which is the highest ranked university, because they do more research and it kind of works. But we're very careful to want to partner also with universities that are not in the top rankings, because everybody needs to be included, because we don't have the right voices in the room at the moment. So I think that's important. So to those 2 questions, we need to start somewhere, and we need to get African voices in the conversation. The infrastructure point, funding, I think that the first thing is to get the funders aligned to the fact that the funding needs to be for Africa-centric projects. The funding needs to sit in Africa. The PIs need to be African, and the lead authors on the publications need to be African. So that if we were going to start somewhere with the infrastructure question, I would start with the funders. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so no, thank you. Well, on the ranking, I think that is a purely academic discussion, but I think that definitely is something important. No, but I think it's something important because Africa is suffering of the fact that not only in the academic world, but let's take in the banking world, they are paying a kind of, I would say, bias toward the reliability of the system. in the sense that, for instance, in the case of guarantees, the rating agencies that are not European, by the way, are American, most of them, they tend to discount Africa just on a reputational question. And I don't know if this is applicable also to the academy. I don't know, I hope not, but this could also be the case. Then, to respond to the second question, it's clear that when we talk about higher education, we are talking about the point of the iceberg. And in order to have, I think it's very important, by the way, to keep an eye on higher education and to promote and push higher education, STEM, research and innovation, and so on. But at the same time, we have to take into account that to have this higher education system working, we need a basic education that is providing people able to, I would say, exploit the possibility that the higher education is giving to them. And this is definitely a big problem. And this is why I think that the biggest initiative in the case of the European Union is, of course, is not just higher education, but is to promote quality education at the basic and intermediate level in order to cope with one of the big problems, that is the literacy poverty. That means that sometimes people, they are able to read, but they don't understand what they read. And it can seem something strange, but it's something that definitely is important, because if you are not able to understand and to assimilate what you are reading, then it's completely useless to give education in a way or another. And this, the last point is considering infrastructure. I think that with the pandemics and with the development of technology, I think that what is definitely important is the access to the knowledge in a loose foot way, if I may say. So in the sense that you should have an access to the digital tools, an access that is physical but is also economically affordable, in order to create this, I would say, virtual network. Then, of course, there is the possibility of putting in place physical exchange and so on, but I think that the most important is the access to the knowledge. And I think that would be useful maybe to start, you know, that in Europe we have this Europe Scientific Open Access Cloud. Why not to create an African open access cloud and having this bridge between the two clouds in order to put all the knowledge that we have in common?
Thank you very much. Dr. Nguemo?
Yeah, very shortly, ranking, excellencies, and infrastructure, they are all nearly interconnected, because to be excellent, we need infrastructure. And to be in the good ranking position, you have to generate a good result. Or to be better, see from the other side. I mean, talking about excellency, it is always difficult to put everything in the same level when we have to choose some candidate, maybe. It's why the AU will have to have a specific program from Africa compared to Europe and so on. I mean, the gap, of course, the gap will be reduced when we will accept that people can do something different, like we do, and get the same result, or get their result that they need. Reduce, give more infrastructure would definitely bring us to the excellency. I think this is one thing that is clear.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nguemo. And now, quite elegantly, we'll finish the morning's panel by giving the microphone back to our keynote speaker, Professor Woldemariam.
Okay, I'll just make a brief statement. Well, I think we need to have a critical kind of investigation on what has been working well in the case of cooperation and collaboration so far, Africa and Europe. What has been working well and what has been not working well. We have to identify that. Look into things critically from both perspectives, and then try to connect the dots and fill the gaps. I think we should approach that scientifically. Because if you continue as it was before, you know, business as usual will also find result as usual. We don't move anywhere. We ended up having the same results. So we have to do things differently. And we should also address the priorities of African higher education system. Priorities, access is a problem. I mean, a huge number of students are out of university and school because we don't have enough space. The infrastructure, the space doesn't go in line with the student population we have. Of course, relevance is also an issue. Students graduate, but they're not going to give or to fit into the industry or the economic demand in the country. They're not contributing anything, even though they have degrees and masters. So there's an issue of relevance. Whose priority, whose issue needs to be addressed should be a question. Of course, quality is a serious agenda for us. So I think collaboration should try to identify the exact gaps and problems and try to fill that from the perspective of both partners. It should be mutually beneficiary for both. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, last words before our coffee break. First of all, apologies to Professor Busse for cutting her off earlier, but you know, we want to be the best and most generous hosts possible and get more audience involvement. First, thank you should be to the audience. Thank you for your questions. And of course, part of the audience is the panel 2, which will be convened after the break. So from audience to the stage, we keep the conversation going. And our final thank you to the panelists themselves, please. Thank you very much for your thoughts, for sharing your thoughts. And now we have the opportunity to do it informally over coffee after we have the final word from either, she wouldn't let me do this, from our pro-rector, Professor Busse.
I wanted to thank you for chairing this wonderful panel, and thank you all again. So let's do this. And I just wanted to mention one very interesting thing in relation to what we have discussed very briefly, because it's wonderful, and Ludovic has allowed me to announce this now, because the Coimbra group has of course joined several other European and African organizations in signing a call for action aimed at raising the attention of the next African Union EU ministerial meeting in Addis Ababa, and the call towards an African EU science, technology and innovation program has just been released today at 11 o'clock, and Coimbra has signed it. So I just wanted to mention this, which means that we are part of this group as well, which is fantastic, and I think that's a nice finale to this wonderful panel. So thank you very much as well. And now it's coffee.
Welcome to panel 2. I just take over from my colleague, Christiane Biel, and I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Emmanuel Sulle to you, who is the moderator of panel 2, Empowering Young Talents. Dr. Sulle is a research director at Aga Khan University, Arusha campus, Tanzania, and a global faculty at the University of Cologne. He is well known as a leading scholar on agrarian studies in Africa, a contributor to the Network of Excellence on Land Governance in Africa. He is currently working on how the SDGs shape Tanzania's vision for a green economy. Welcome, Sulle.
Thank you, Suzanne, for that excellent introduction. I am here and very pleased to introduce the panel, which is going to talk about how to empower youth. And I can tell you, these are brilliant minds. They will be talking about what the youth in Africa want. And they're doing in a way that engage the youth, not actually top down. So I'm very pleased that the session is enriched with science and the young minds here. But to start our presentation, I'll just briefly introduce the panelists very briefly, and I encourage everyone to read their profile because it's so rich and so connected to everyone's activity in this room, given the introduction I got from the sessions yesterday and this morning. So our first speaker today will be Professor Antonio Morone from the University of Pavia, Italy. He is coordinating the project called SAHA, and he is working with his colleague, Professor Sabri Mohammed from the University of Benghazi. And Professor Mohammed will be presenting via Zoom. Antonio, please wave. And then the second presenter from this session and this panel will be Professor Juha Kasken, and he will be talking about a very interesting project on energy transitions and the futures. And he is from the university in Finland, and he is very interested on future studies, given that he actually founded the Futures Research Center in 1998. So very excellent and very connected to the Global South Studies Center here at the University of Cologne. And he will be talking about a project called Propel. It is a technology on energy transition and working in collaboration with the University of Lesotho, which I was lucky to visit in March 2022, and they do a lot of excellent work in incubating the youth in technology. The third panelist, whom I will introduce again when they sit up, is formed by 4 colleagues. 2 of them are sitting in the middle. You can see how we are very cautious of gender. And that team is comprised of Daniela Smart from the University of Cologne. She's the head of the counseling unit and associate head of global responsibility, and she's leading the project called Leadership for Africa. And she will be presenting with her colleagues based in Nairobi, Dr. Kellen Kiambati from the Karatina University, and she is also the Director of Resource Mobilization and International Programs and lead senior lecturer and mentor. She's based in Kenya. Another person working with Daniela and Kellen is Joshua Obara from the Technical University of Munich, and he is doing masters in sustainable resource management. And also the last in that group is with us, Stacy Ogembo from the University of Cologne. Can you wave, please? She's doing her masters of political science and is a scholar in the second generation on the lead cohort. So you can see we have a rich panel, and the last panel presenter will be presenting about the GATE project. The GATE is Gender Awareness and Transformation Through Education. So education is the theme here, and that is Anna Mwakitalu from the Trinity College, Dublin. Anna Mwakitalu is also an assistant lecturer in the Department of Educational Foundations Management and Lifelong Learning at the Dar es Salaam University College of Education, known as DUSE, in Tanzania, East Africa. So these are our panelists who will be sharing their projects, which is really looking at the aspects of empowering the youth through science and education. So the first presenter will be Anthony, and he will make a brief introduction, and then his colleague will join via Zoom. Anthony, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this kind introduction. I'm very glad to be here on behalf of our university consortium and to have the opportunity to briefly present the SAHA project, that is acronymous. This means RISE, Libyan Higher Education Health Sector for the benefit of local society. The SAHA project is a capacity building project founded by the European Union with 1 million euro, and the length of the project is 3 years. It was started in 2020, and now we are approaching at the end of our project. Our consortium is composed by the Pavia University that is leading the consortium, and then Granada University that is also partner of the Coimbra group, the Western Bohemian University in Pilsen, Czech Republic, and the Mediterranean University Union in Rome, that is a network of universities. And then on the south side of our consortium, Tripoli University, Sabah University, Sirte University, Misurata University, and the Libyan International Medical University in Benghazi, who is represented today by our colleague Sabri Gabran. The SAHA project is a multidisciplinary project intended to rise and contribute to the stability of Libya that we know is passing through a decade of civil war, and now hopefully is trying to get more stable institution. And of course the academia was one of the most important institutions inside in the Libyan picture to assure a minimum of social interaction in a space of war. And let me say that in my experience, so personally I'm an historian, and so I was working and doing my research in the field in Libya in the last 15 years. So personally speaking, the contribution of our colleagues in Libya was very important to counterbalance the logic of the war, of the civil war. So going very briefly, giving you an overview of the project, we have three main area that we are covering with our project. So the teaching area is devoted to establish a master in science, a master for the healthcare management in all the Libyan partner universities. And then we have a research part of the project that is related to the establishment of a data center for collecting data from the hospitals and also from medical institutions together with the universities. And of course the first thing and the aim of the data center is to contribute to the collecting and doing scientific research about clinical data. This is another point that is quite important in a country like Libya that again is passing through a period of difficulties that are touching also the medical institutions. And then the third and last area of our project is devoted to the outreach mission of the university. So the idea is to promote the policy dialogue in Libya, especially at the local level, so at the level of local community, involving especially the municipalities of some Libyan cities that are the reality more active in promoting the peace building process in the country. And especially we are planning, this is just what we have to do in the last part of our projects, we are planning to opening, let me say, the knowledge that we produce inside in the Libyan university to the third parts, so basically involving the Libyan citizens in the academic environment with the idea to training in specific some personal civil servant and other people that are now working in the health institution inside in the municipalities or at the level of municipalities. Of course, the youth is at the core, is center stage of our project. And let me say that it's very important on our point of view to develop not only the capacity in the field of education, in the field of teaching, but also to give the opportunity to young students to have the opportunity also to practice research in Libya, because one of the main, possibly one of the main current problem in the higher system in Libya is especially that. So the capacity of the Libyan university to doing research, and the idea to combine the establishment of this master degree with also a core part in the field of research is precisely intended not only to train the students, but basically, hopefully, to train also future researchers. I pass the floor to my colleague Sabri, that should be online.
The title of my presentation is the development process of healthcare management MSc program, Faculty of Business Administration Experience, libyAn International Medical University. In this short presentation, I'm going to talk about how we established the MSc program in healthcare management. The establishment process has gone through several stages. The first step was the assignment and of preparing a draft of preparing a draft of the MSc program in healthcare management. This task was assigned to Dr. Sabri Gabran, the Dean of Faculty of Business Administration. International benchmarks were used for that end, and a proposal was submitted. The proposed program consisted of 10 courses, which is equal to 80 European credit transfer system, and this is accounts for 16 ECTS. In total, we have 96 ECTS, attending 4 workshops out of 10 offered. Each term is mandatory. Each student must choose 4 of which to attend and pass. These workshops were specifically designed to develop the academic and professional skills of the students and to overcome any weaknesses in the curriculum. In terms of the teaching and learning techniques, the program was designed according to active learning strategies. Hence, lectures, discussions, visual presentations, case studies, scenarios analysis, homework, midterms, and final exams were adopted for the educational and evaluation purposes. The next step was to give an online presentation on the MSc program to all partner universities, where the participants discussed the proposal in detail. Some amendments were requested in that meeting and considered in the revised version of MSc program. Another step was taken is the partners universities were invited to meeting in CERT to participate in the partners meeting in CERT city, where all MSc proposals were compared among each other. Some variations were spotted there, and it was necessary to minimize the variation to a great extent. Hence, and after that meeting, 6 core courses were approved and named SAHA courses. Also, and based on that meeting, the MSc program was amended by the Postgraduate Studies Committee at Libyan International Medical University. Several consecutive meetings were held to discuss all affairs related to the MSc program and to take any necessary decisions to push the process further. After this step, the scientific committee nominated some of candidates to take part in the program as an academic staff. The proposed names were discussed and approved by the University Council. The next step was to prepare the syllabus of the course according to the Libyan International Quality Assurance Center format, and the reviewing the forms by the quality assurance consultant for to ensure that they are up to the standard. The next step was the travel to Italy and Spain for the training programs. Upon completing of this, we returned to Libya. A new office was with full furniture and equipment was allocated to the MSc program affairs with a secretary for the administrative affairs. Admissions criteria for the MSc candidates were proposed and approved by the University's Council. An announcement was posted on the Facebook page of the university and its website about the admission criteria. As a result of this step, a number of 70 applicants applied to join the program. Out of this number, only 30 students selected who applied that fulfills the requirement. The selection process done after the students have passed the interview, which was professionally conducted and recorded for future reference. After this step, an induction week was hosted for the first batch of the MSc program students to familiarize them with the MSc level and the university's environment. Each student was given an email and account on the faculty's Moodle. The academic calendar fall 2022-2023 was revised and announced, and each student was enrolled in the Moodle. The study started at the end of November 2022 as students were attending lectures, seminars, workshops, and other active learning activities. The midterm exams were held after that, and the results were kept in the examination office for future reference. Quality assurance reports on the educational process, lectures, and exams were prepared by the quality assurance officer, Mr. Niral Bograra, based on the students' feedback collected from the satisfaction forms. After this step, the study continued regularly, and the supportive workshops were arranged as needed to support the students. The final exams were conducted as scheduled. The final exam results were prepared, reviewed, and approved, and then made it available to the students through the Student Information System, SES. SES can be accessed from anywhere using a student's username and password. At the end of the term, the quality assurance reports were prepared and announced. Students' transcripts with their cumulative GPAs were prepared and made available to the students. At the end of the first term, 2 weeks were given to the students for holiday. After the 2 weeks holiday, the study started again with 2 batches. The new batch started the study after accepting 14 applicants out of 22 applied. They were enrolled in the Moodle and given usernames and passwords to use this tool in their classes. The study started in April, and the 2 batches were attending their regular classes and activities as scheduled. The midterm exams will be held next week on the 10th of June. All MSc program information is now available online on the faculty website, and it is being updated regularly. On the 5th of May 2023, the Ministry of Education has issued the resolution allowing Libyan International Medical University to teach postgraduate studies. This resolution gives the Faculty of Business Administration at LIMU the right to start MSc program in healthcare management. Conclusion, in this short presentation, I have tried to give a general idea about how we managed to reach to this stage of establishing MSc program. Thank you.
But why to do project on renewable energy in Lesotho? I don't know what is happening. But as we know, Lesotho has had quite a low human development index. Only around 8% of the households are electrified in rural areas. Current electricity generation capacity meets less than a half of its current demand, and therefore import is needed. Now you get the idea. At the same time, the cost of renewable energy is decreasing, availability is improving, so there's a great promise in decentralized renewable energy technologies. And of course, renewable energy expertise advances national policy goals like access to energy services, and it helps to improve the energy efficiency in the country. At least this is what we think. I don't know why my slides are not changing, but I can explain this anyway. So there's a big picture for energy challenges in Lesotho that we have to map out. We try to develop together with our partners the energy education. Proper project is one way to do it, to build up a new type of energy education. All right, what happened now?
Put the full slides.
Yeah. Doesn't show. But anyway, I explain this even if you don't see my slides. So what we are trying to do is design and implement a sustainable energy production and consumption training. Training the trainees on teaching methods, problem-based learning, online learning, and blended learning methodologies, developing and piloting online and blended intensive courses for students. Also, mobility schemes are there, collaboration agreements, and research visits. And we also want to engage the stakeholders in the system, so want to implement a dissemination and exploitation strategy, have seminars, talks with the stakeholders, and so on. So this project has just started, and we wait for a more or less big success on it. There's definitely a need. And when we think about the previous panel, so this is not something that we introduce now the Finnish system to Lesotho. No, we want to discuss with our partners what are the major things in Lesotho that need to address and try to discuss on the future alternatives and possibilities for the best renewable energy future for Lesotho. And this is a part of a longer work we have been doing there. In fact, there are 2 other projects working more or less on the same time on Lesotho and future, on energy. There's a Deploy project, Erasmus project. So not just one project, but more or less a process that we want to develop with our partners in Lesotho for next coming years. And then you can ask, what is the youth perspective in all of this? So, of course, the big question here is the existential risk by climate change, given us by the climate change. So we want to be part of solving that in Lesotho context. So we want to promote future resilient, sustainable energy education for the future generations. We want to focus on sustainable energy issues, address local educational needs, have an increase of green jobs, promote the mitigation responses to climate change, and of course want to have some high-quality learning outcomes for students. So I don't know if this is, how is this going to work, but at least the first signs are pretty good. The reason I am here is that the project team is actually have a meeting now in Lesotho. So I ended up to present you the project and projects to you. And then I remember that the head of our internationalization office asked me to say what the University of Turku is doing, and now I have to quote her message. So this is her promoting University of Turku. So University of Turku is currently finalizing its policy for strengthening long-term mutual commitments with African counterparts. We are promoting open science and open education, access to knowledge with our African partners. We have a role in Finland coordinating the Finland-Africa platform for innovation called FAPI. That's funded by the Finnish Minister of Education and Culture. And there is also some network activities under this scheme. Now Irinia did this. Thank you for this. I have time for the questions in the end of the panel, and I hope you can see that my slides somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the technology again. Now I welcome Daniela and her team. So Daniela, the stage is yours.
You can already go to the third slide with context. And meanwhile, I want to say a big hello to the project coordinator, Dr. Georg Pavia, who is here in the public. And now I want to tell you something about the context of the program and our target group. So the target group, the participants are scholarship holders by the German Academic Exchange Service, like Stacy and Joshua. So they receive a full scholarship for their master's studies in Germany. And we there are international students, some students are refugee students, and they are all from sub-Saharan African countries studying in Germany at various German universities, different subjects from engineering to robotics to theology to German studies, really everything almost. And our program is a compulsory additional program of 1 year, so out of the 2 master's years, it's 1 year program which qualifies the students in good governance and career development. And the project goes for 5 years. We have between 40 and 70 scholars per year. And we have the second cohort here.
Joshua, next slide, please. Yeah, so one type of seminar we have is the SDG Connect seminar. This seminar is very important because it brings different students together. Students from the University of Cologne, students from partner universities of Cologne, and students from the Leadership for Africa program, which consists of students from different countries in Africa. And a sample of a task we did in class is a 5-minute presentation of either choosing a project at the global level where you present the name of your country, you present the country of your first name, and then you compare it with another country of your choice. And in that comparison, you check on which SDGs they're doing very well and which SDGs they're not performing very well. And at the local level, this is about local initiatives that are also making strides towards the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. So we look at companies, we look at initiatives made by individuals and how they're contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals. So, yeah. So because my name starts with an S, I took Switzerland and I compared it with Ghana. And as you can see, Switzerland is doing very well in affordable and clean energy, whereas Ghana is doing very well in responsible consumption, production and consumption. And from the figures, you can see green represents that they are doing very well in that SDG, and the SDG has been already achieved, and they're still making efforts to achieve all the indicators under the SDGs. Red means that there are still major challenges remaining in the achievement of those goals. Gray, as you can see, Switzerland has life below water, and Ghana reduced inequalities. That means that there is no information about what they're doing towards achievement or the attainment of this goal. And yellow, from the pictures you can see there, represent that there are still significant challenges remaining in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Yes, and at the local level, we also presented projects, and one of the projects that was presented is the SITA project. This is a South Korean-based company that has been the first, I think, in the world to find a way to decompose plastic waste in a very environmentally sustainable way. And what is important is that they're planning to share this technology with the world. Other than that, we also have guidelines for reducing plastic waste and global partnership, and also guidelines for reducing plastic waste and eco-friendly initiative. Below these different initiatives, you can see how many sustainable development goals they are touching on. Like SITA is touching on all the 17 sustainable development goals, which is also very, very important. I think we can all check up on what they're doing because it's really a good effort towards the achievement of the goals.
So as you saw, Stacy showed an example of one class or one event format that we have in the program, and you already noticed that our theoretical framework are the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals in the Agenda 2030 by the UN, which target the sustainability of people, planet, prosperity, and peace through partnerships. So partnerships are key. And of course, the higher education institutions play a key role, because not only do we touch SDG 4, quality education, but we actually touch all SDGs. And we interpret the partnerships' importance in two ways. On the one hand, the partnerships, or the importance of partnerships between academia, NGOs, economy, governance, so all levels of society. And on the other hand, the importance of partnerships on eye level internationally. So we see each other as one world, and the SDG, they have been criticized a lot, and sometimes it's true, but at least they are trying to change the narrative in the sense that we all belong to one world and we speak a common language. And this is what we're trying to do in the seminars, and what we're trying to do with local and global is to show that not only top-down is important, but also bottom-up, not only in terms of SDG, but also to see how the individual can support, because a leader is not just somebody in an official function, but also somebody who motivates others, somebody who makes a change. We have a method which we use, which is the individual development plan, where everybody of the students have to think about what they will do in the future and how it will relate to the SDGs. And Joshua's idea was starting a startup, and it's almost already to being in function, I think, so he's really very far, and it has to do with the SDGs 11 and 9, and the processes we go through our SWOT analysis, which is like on the personal level, what are my strengths, my weaknesses, my threatens, what threatens, but on the personal level, and then we have the PESTEL analysis, which are the political, economical, environmental factors, legal factors, which are like on the level from outside. And we do this in a mentorship program, and Dr. Kellen Kiambati will explain a bit more about it. And we also have at the end elevator pitches where the students present it in front of the other students, and they have a peer review, because we have interdisciplinary students, so if you explain it well enough, everybody, also a non-expert, understands. So this is the idea behind. And now, Dr. Kellen Kiambati, over to you.
Joshua, please. Thank you so much, Daniela. Listening to our conversations since morning, it is so clear that we need to grow future African leaders. And the University of Cologne, through their LEAD program, the high partnerships that Daniela has already spoken about, is making it possible. I am privileged to be one of the facilitators and mentors in the LEAD program. And some of the events, formats, and methods that we use through the LEAD program is number one, lecture series, where they are delivered by German and African colleagues. In this series, we have meticulously and carefully selected topics that are related to the issues that we must address through the LEAD program on our African continent. And some of the areas we discuss with our participants are areas to do with peace and security, democracy, empowerment, and civil society. In terms of the methods that we use in the LEAD program is the use of individual development plans, where participants of the program are encouraged to think through their career or a business idea that can provide solutions to some of the African challenges that they are facing, just like one of the ideas that has been presented by Daniela that is being implemented by Joshua. We also undertake mentorship of our participants, where participants are paired with facilitators to help them to formulate their IDPs and see to it that they develop them into something that can be executed to solve either their career challenges or the business problems that they have selected to solve. Once they are through with their IDPs, it is presented to peers for review, and so that they can receive feedback and polish their ideas through the plenary discussions. And most important also, we support them to do elevator pitch, where they're able to present and showcase their ideas within either 3 or 5 minutes to a possible investor or a possible funder or a policy actor who must make a difference on the continent. So then, looking to the future, what is there for the African continent? Next, Joshua. 2022 and 2023 presents a 1945 moment for Africa. At a time like this, the world was devastated by war, and it required to be reconstructed. Also, the last 3 years, we have had COVID-19 pandemic, coupled with other human capital, long-standing challenges, especially on the African continent. And the world is socially and economically in need of a reset. Therefore, in preparing these leaders, Africa must be prepared to reset in a stronger way so as to engage as equal partners like other continents. And that is why for us, the LEAD program is so important. It's also important, and it matters that we consider or take note that 60% of African population is under 25 years, and young Africans are expected to constitute 42% of the global youth. Africa READ program is helping prepare young Africans so as to contribute in a meaningful way as they constitute the 42% of the global youth. So then, the critical mass of young leaders that the University of Cologne is helping to raise and grow is will ensure a continent that assures everybody has shared prosperity, everybody is able to enjoy equal opportunities, there is inclusivity, and most important, sustainability, even as we pursue SDGs. Therefore, University of Cologne must have mapped the need for young result-oriented leaders in Africa before anyone else did so. And so we thank them for their partnership. Thank you.
Online from Kenya, and she's a lecturer and mentor in our program. And here just really some pictures. We have online and on-site classes and two really short wrap-up conclusion slides. Joshua, if you could move forward. You can show the whole slide, exactly. So what we're trying to do in our project is not just it's not just about knowledge and skills, of course, career trainings, project management skills, presentation skills and so on, but also of having a common language in attitudes and values, because we are training the future leaders and they will work in different sectors of society, in different parts of the world. So it is important that together we, the students, the team, the Cologne students and everybody involved speaks the same language, and this is what we're trying to do in all our lecture formats. We also have keynote speeches. We had Professor Woldemariam, Dr. Nguemo, Professor Juncker. They were all part of the LEAD program also. And yeah, we also have a UN debate simulation, intercultural events and career trainings. And now I really have the last slide. Just to say, common language, global mindset, we tackle the problems together, interdisciplinarity, and we create a sustainable network which generates more partnerships. And really the last one is just to thank everybody involved in the project and also put some names on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can imagine how hard it is to stop these young minds, and with the technology on our way. So I think the technology is showing us that we need more investment in technology. So I want to welcome our last presenter, Dr. Mwakitalu. Please.
Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Anna Mwakitalu. I'm a PhD student in Trinity College Dublin. And I'm also an assistant lecturer in Dar es Salaam University College of Education. And I'm here to present to you GATE project, that is Gender Awareness and Transformation Through Education, which is a partnership project between Trinity College Dublin and Dar es Salaam University College of Education, with the aim of supporting research, expertise, and capacities in education. So my presentation is going to be outlined as the way shown, the introduction of the project, overview of the progress, the insights into the changes observable on the ground, and the journey to the Gender Research Center. Gender awareness and transformation through education was previously the ideation of two brilliant women one from TCD, that was Dr. Susan Murphy, and one from Dar es Salaam University, Dr. Christina Raphael, who is now the Deputy Principal Academic Research and Consultancy. So these two people met in UCD, Dublin, and in 2014, 2018, they started mapping the project by mapping out of institutional structures and support for staff and students, work-life balance, and academic research progression. They reviewed policies, procedures, and practices around recruitment, retention, progression of female academics. But also they identified core gaps in college policy architecture. Baseline and repeated multi-annual surveys of student attitudes, perspectives, priorities, and practices was also done. But also annual student focus groups, 250 qualitative narratives was also mapped and identified, and staff interviews, more than 50 qualitative narratives. Policy development phase, whereby gender policy was also developed and anti-sexual assessment policy was also developed. And dissemination activity, one co-authored peer-reviewed paper was published, 4 conference papers. Dissemination activities were also done in Tanzania, in Ireland, in Canada, and USA. So the project's ambition, this one, as I said before, is an institutional collaboration partnership for the capacity building and development of a Center for Excellence on Gender Equality and Female Empowerment in Higher Education in Tanzania, with objectives of strengthening institutional partnership between the higher education institutions in Ireland and Tanzania on gender equality. Support for the development of a gender center for excellence in gender equality through a blend of institutional and individual capacity development initiatives as Dar es Salaam University College of Education. So the special position of Dar es Salaam University College of Education, this one is a public university providing secondary teacher education to graduate and postgraduate levels. Over 250 plus academic staff teaching approximately 5,000 and trainee teachers placed in partnership schools all over Tanzania. DUSE is uniquely positioned to increase the number of female students completing second level, but it also builds a national network of community leaders and change drivers, but it also increased the number of females moving into third level education, but also build a pipeline of future female role models and leadership that can influence national development and progress. So the GATE objectives, one of them was, we had a number of objectives, and one of it is to train a new generation of experts, PhD and postdoc levels in gender and education. And at DUSE, that's building a research and teaching capacities. And under this, the project planned to have build a general awareness and sensitivity across all teaching practices, but also build a general gender awareness and sensitivity across the student body, but also build a national network of engagement with the DUSE Gender Research Center for Excellence, but also support DUSE in its institutional transformation to become a site and a center of excellence in East Africa through the design, development, and the delivery of a gender action plan for the institution. And thus, for the first objective, training a new generation of gender experts, I am one of the beneficiaries of this project. So GATE's work packages had 6 work packages. One of it was in good governance, whereby GATE project wanted to develop a governance framework and external advisory board, and it was able to do this. For we have external advisory boards all over the collaboration between DUCE and Trinity through participation action research, protocols for data management and administration. And the third work package was building gender research efforts through regional networking and conference activities. And we have seen this, we have been present in so many conferences in Singapore, in New York, in Tanzania, and here today in Germany. Building research capacities and knowledge through PhD and postdoc training, develop and deliver 8 staff and student training packages, but also participatory action research, we call it PAR, Learning, Knowledge, Insights for Gender and Educational Practices, and the PAR framework by seeing the outcomes for research and policy briefings on gender and for impact. And the last work package is to disseminate education and communication. So drafting drafting GATE handbook, this is an ongoing activity, and we have managed to write a number of articles, conference proceedings, conference presentations. The impacts of these projects, one of the activities was to encourage female leadership development within DUCE through building targeted networks, research support, and leadership training opportunities. Also to increase the number of research outputs that include gender dimension across the whole of the college community, but also to encourage the development of a wider networking with other higher learning institutions across Tanzania and Ireland, but also to document and disseminate the methodology, methods, and theoretical learnings from the GATE project for wider dissemination. The long-term effect that can be found from this project is the increase the number of females moving into third-level education within the college, to build a pipeline of future female role models and leadership that can influence national development and progress, but also building transformative relations within the institution with the surrounding communities, and building sustainable gender networks for dialogues and discussions on gender-related issues among academics in higher learning institutions across Tanzania and Ireland. And the last one, to build an active platform for gender-related forums and discussions among the pre-service teachers in higher education across Tanzania and Ireland. But then during the course of this project, there was a number of interruptions that the project encountered. They stopped travel, delayed data collection because of the COVID pandemic, postponed dissemination of activities, increased need for care, loss of loved one. We have some of them who passed away, deeper recognition of the value and importance of care and interconnection. So the deliverables at the end of the year 4, and the last year in 2022, the project marked the end of its activities. So we had a lot of deliverables that were successful, but some of them remain ongoing, like a presentation of the report and its updates, but also the draft of the handbook on gender and higher education in Tanzania is also still on progress. So what are the changes, indicators for change that can be observed? So we can observe from the project increased popularity of the unit and its activities among the college members, increased awareness and understanding of the GRP among the students and the gender club, allocation of space and opportunity to showcase the gender research activities during the College Research Week, and increased research output. So what do others think about the project? So we invited independent evaluator from October to December who evaluated the project, and one of the objectives was to evaluate progress of the project, implementation with the respect to the overall objectives of the project and to each of the 5 specific objectives of the project above. So to determine facilitation factors to the recorded project achievements and critically analyze, if any, that have contributed to not achieving the project outputs, and document best practices and lessons learned emanating from implementing the project. So the independent evaluation took the approach of the OECD evaluation criteria, where he looked at the relevance, coherence, effectiveness, efficiency, impact, and sustainability of the project. And the findings include that with design and implementation, the project design was evidence-based informed by a baseline assessment and evaluation of previous gender-related work and activity at the university. And the design involved a wide spectrum of key stakeholders among the university community through meetings and consultation. The COVID pandemic necessitated slight adjustments on the mode and the approach of implementing the project. Notable few delays were experienced, mainly as a result of COVID pandemic, and to a large extent the project was implemented as planned. And later, the relevance of the projects that the GATE project ideation benefited from the strong roots of gender equality efforts at DUCE, resulting to exemplary partnership with TCD, and takes advantage of DUCE's position to produce future gendered leaders among the graduating teachers. So I'll go to the last slide, the sustainability of the project. The project has been very sustainable. Plans during the project ideation up to the design. The strong training initiatives were important to sustaining the program outcomes, but also DUCE management is really committed to establishing means of ensuring financial sustainability is made available to the gender activities at the university. But also knowledge and experience gained through the project is used to review the university gender policy as well as curricula across the university. And lastly, establishment of Gender Research Center to continue the research activities started by the project. So this year, January, Gender Research Center was initially initiated, and it has started its activities and is still looking for support in research and funding for research activities. So let me just end there. Thank you.
Big hands. I tried to mention that's 1 minute, 2 minutes, but she was answering many questions that were actually raised from the keynote speech. And I had time. How can you stop a lady talking about how to empower ladies through education? So it was a challenge, and I think I tried. So there are two things I really want to highlight from this panel, actually four. So first of all, big thank you to our panelists, and please a big applause to them again, all of them. And I want to tell you, these sessions have reminded me, as a Tanzanian coming from Arusha, where the Nelson Mandela African Institution of Science and Technology is sitting, and where they have the Vice Chancellor Academic Research and Innovation, and that is very new. No university has that innovation. They have consultancy, but they purposely changed that because they want to make a university for the society and for the business. So for the first time, and we just signed an MOU with them from the Aga Khan University where I sit, the aim is the universities have to move away from the normal business or knowledge generation, but making sure that the knowledge that is generation has impact in communities and the society. So that is what they do. Any master's student, PhD student goes there with an idea that can be researched, incubated, and taken to the business and to the community. For example, it's at the Nelson Mandela where the nano filter has been developed and the business model created to benefit communities, particularly women. So I think this panel has tried to address the subjects in terms of technology and enabling the youth. One other important question I think that these panelists have raised to us is really how do you enable people, and Daniela's question has really, or subject on leadership for Africa is really answering that question, giving the youth of Africa a room to think, develop their ideas, and run through it. And Juha's transition to energy is just an amazing, and I think apart from understanding that we need to transition towards renewable energy and so forth, and SDG, which is also part of the leadership, is actually how universities in Africa, in Europe, are domesticating such frameworks and helping policymakers to domesticate. I'm researching green economy, but I can tell you bureaucrats, for example, in Tanzania have no clue what the green economy is. They were asking me, do you mean blue economy? I said, blue economy is a subset of it. So really you can have fantastic frameworks at a global level, regional level, but if you don't domesticate them on your training curriculum and the policy framework, you cannot evaluate them if you are achieving any of those ones. So bringing the energy towards the young leaders and train them, it's great stuff. And SAHA's project with Antonio and Sabri is just what we need, integrating health and environment. These silos of anthropology, environment, economics, policy cannot help us. We have to change as a university and really invest in interdisciplinary studies. So even our ethical review committees have to change, because you used to submit your health to the health department and science to a science, but now you need to assess the impact of climate change on human health, on environment, and on people. You need a multidisciplinary team to understand that. So I think this session has opened up the discussion that we started yesterday in the other meeting and today's in morning sessions. And I'm really pleased that this session had. And I will ask 2 questions, preferably gender balanced, so that we wind up. And also I really ask you to forgive us for the delay. We delayed this first session and tea was delayed and the technology was with us, which I'm not, it's not the first thing. We have to get through that. I think that's the innovation part. So hands up at the end, and someone help me with 2 questions, please. The first question is already there. The second question, just wait for the second, start the question and then we will answer.
Okay. Yes, hi, my name is Sulle from University of Turku, and I want to thank all the panelists. That was very nice presentations. And my question goes to all of you. So how do you see that these projects that you are running can be scaled up both in different regions or different countries even? So how do you see the potential and some maybe practical things how to do it? Thank you.
Second question. People might be hungry. Do we have any question? Here, please.
Well, I'd like to raise a question related to the previous panel. After the previous panel, I was kind of puzzled what I take home, because I felt that we were criticized in so many ways that we have done everything wrong in the past 60 years or so. I exaggerate, of course. And now we saw a number of very good examples, and I try, in my mind, to figure out, are these now the exceptions to the rule, or is the bigger picture that was presented in the previous panel one that is just not knowing about all the things that are going on? Because I assume that all the Coimbra universities in this room have projects like this running. I mean, individual, different, what they exactly do. We have also several projects. So I try to figure out, and I did that already in the coffee break, what I take home is what we've done wrong, or is it that we do good projects but we do not advertise them enough so that there is still the general criticism, or do we have, like this is related to the previous question, upscale all these things, or I don't know, do better advertising? I'm kind of puzzled how we deal with these kind of contradictory results of the 2 panels. One very critical about everything that has been going on and what we have to do better, and here we have a bunch of examples that I think are representative for a lot of things that are actually going on. So how does that fit together?
Thank you. I think we just take 1 minute from every panelist who has answered. Please, feel free. Can this mic enable? I tried, I don't know if they work, but probably because I don't speak German. Please, do you have go ahead.
Yeah, it's working. Yeah, scaling the projects. Well, I think that is possible. We have been, for example, in our case, we have been trying to do this type of project, we have done these in Southeast Asia, Caribbean, and Africa. The thing is that is related to second question is actually, do they have an impact, a lasting impact? And that seems to be a bit problematic. We seem to forget all the learnings in after 3 years or so, and then we reinvent the wheel again. So sometimes I'm also a bit skeptic. Do we actually can have an impact? But on the other hand, when you deal with the young people who can take the torch and take it to the future, I'm still lightly positive mind in that there might be better world heading, at least for them. I'm already so old that I won't see it. But yes, there are a lot of projects. There are lack of knowledge management of what we are doing all around the world. Can AI help in this? Let's see how it goes. But definitely some sort of data collection system and data mining would be needed on the results that we have been doing so far all around the world in the last 30, 40 years. So possibilities are there. Are we taking them into account? So there might be some places for development.
Please, go ahead. 1 minute.
About scaling the project, I will suggest that the scholarship from the DAD, especially from students from Africa, should have this lead program as a package that comes with the scholarship, because in these topics we discuss also how the students from different African countries that are experiencing war, how can they still achieve sustainable development goals in these kind of situations? How can they be an impact in the society? Not just about studying, and also about what else can you do in the society. I think it's important.
This one? So I think there's a saying, it's attributed to Einstein, but we don't know exactly if he said it. It's like, it's harder to crack a prejudice than an atom. So I think that our job is very important also to change the perspective, because we do student exchange, and of course everybody looks to the US, for example, but if you take a look at the SDG, it's just if you see how US performs, and I'll take now non-European and non-African countries, Argentina, they have 2 green SDGs, and the US doesn't have anyone at the moment. So, and one is quality education in Argentina. So I think even just seeing it, it makes you think, okay, maybe there are other countries. So I think it's important for the perspective, and I think everything what was said is true, but it's good to stay optimistic. And really, I'm a pessimist, but probably as you heard me speak, you thought I was an optimist. It's just because of Stacy, Joshua, and all these bright minds, which just, it's incredible to work together, and I'm very optimistic that we will do something in small steps. And just maybe one last thing, this SDG Partnerships database is an official database of the UN, so every little initiative can be registered there, and maybe then it's more visible. This is why we also wanted to share. And I don't know if you have time. Kellen, do you want to add something maybe?
No, one online, okay. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Anna.
Okay, so when I come back to our project and speaking with how can this project be replicated to other universities or higher learning institutions. So if you look at the problem of females or gender equality in higher learning institutions, and especially in senior leadership positions, all the higher learning institutions face this problem. So when the project was initially started, then we looked at, so how is it going to be sustainable? So later we had the Gender Research Center, whereby all the activities of gender issues, research and education are there. And so we had to disseminate what we have done into other higher learning institutions in Tanzania. So the dissemination events, a lot of them took place in Dar es Salaam, others in Trinity, others in Canada, to make sure that people know of what GATE has been doing, and other learning institutions can be able to learn from what GATE has been doing. So,
excellent, yeah. Move to Anthony.
I think escalating, or better to say circulating, some result of the project is a hope. And I think that the better way to circulate some result or even some model is to circulate among at the regional level. For example, in the case of Libya, of course, the Maghreb region should be a useful area of circulation of some of the result of the SAHA project. But let me end with the hope that the most important channel to spread the knowledge is still the mobility of the students and mobility of the staff. And up to now, the mobility is usually oriented south to north, and we know that on the contrary, the inter-African mobility is suffering a lot from lack of funds. Even in the case of our project, we push a lot of effort in promoting the internal mobility among the Libyan universities inside in the consortium. Because just to give you an example, many of the colleagues that are participating in the project didn't visit the other university inside in the same country. So just for saying that investing on inter-African or even inside in African countries mobility should be the priority or one of the priority of the European Union, hopefully.
Thank you. Because time is not with us, but two questions actually lead to two things. I think as universities, you need to get away from just dissemination, but do your research in what we call community-driven or community-engaged research, not involving communities. As scholars, we have to get away and understand the politics of language. Involve means, like I say, hello, I have involved you, but engagement is what we need. And finally, get away with language and terms that people want. I will encourage everyone here, drop sub-Saharan Africa, it doesn't exist. It's a colonial and racially loaded term. It's just small things that are gonna make us comfortable and progressive. Thank you so much. Lunch is with us, other sessions are there. I hand over to Suzanne.